or rambling, Barack Obama.
Yeah, YouTube is probably already started. Okay. So don't cuss.
Oh no, we don't.
Just so you know, I will be the head of the countdown. And turn your volume on too. Because you're gonna put it on Facebook. If you're gonna put your phone on Facebook. So we want to monitor the comments. Should be about 40,000 people lining up to watch. It might be 900. I don't know. It was a lot. We got a lot of comments on this last video.
Yeah, like 200 of them, bro.
I believe so.
Did you do another check to make sure that the sound was good?
I can see that it was good. The levels were showing really well. Yeah. So we're good. What's up, everybody? How's everybody doing? Hopefully you're doing well tonight. Thank you for joining us. If you are joining us, if you're joining us at another date, hello. By the time you watch this, the information contained in this particular series of videos, it's not a series, but it's probably going to be different. One of us may not be working. One of us may be not alive. I don't know. So I just want to say hello and goodbye to you both. Well, you just never know. I mean, Corona's going around. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
You know,
I got plans.
You got okay. But no, welcome to the pull up.
That's right.
Today,
We pop our guns.
Shot.
Toots.
You see it?
Wow.
You see it. Toots.
Pop it.
This has already started.
CCW.
Yeah.
Let's see.
I just want to also to compliment you that your perfume smells wonderful. I want to recite my Bible verses.
For the record, I'm not wearing perfume. That's my natural
Oh, that's your
spirit.
fabric salt.
That's my natural spirit.
I know Fabuloso when I smell it.
Do you?
So, so this is
That's my hazmat suit. Yes, I'm
and
staying.
we was all coming trash bags today.
You just came to wrap good plastic. I jumped through the window.
Almost.
Cheers. Take it. No cheers.
Nothing.
It's all good though.
So,
game. Soon as one of y'all start coughing, I'm about to hold you down.
y'all saw that video where the girl said, "Oh, people die from the flu anyway. What's this?"
So listen, that was hilarious.
So this is Andrew Big Dog # Real Thug Phillips from the Shy.
That's right.
And y'all know him. I'm Jackson. And tonight we have the distinct honor and privilege. What's up, Barry? How y'all?
Pleasure.
And to have with us, joining us tonight, the illustrious, wonderful, fabulous queen of information. You know what I'm saying? The queen of information, the one and only, Dr. Kyra Greene is here. So real quick before we get started, I was at a Democratic dinner. I don't remember which one it was. It was last year. I think it was last year, late last year. And there was a lot of important people there. I think that was the night Kimberly Ellis was there. The sister, the Muslim sister that was there. Was you were that's the dinner, right? Was you at the one? The Muslim lady was there from Philadelphia.
Yes.
Right? Mm-hmm. So all these important people was there. Kimberly Ellis and all just a bunch of important people. And in the midst of all of what was going on, somebody said, "Hey, there's somebody that I need for you to meet." And I'm telling the story because I wasn't sure. 2 weeks ago, we were on the show. I wasn't sure if it was Kyra, and I realized, why didn't I know that? And I was like, well, because when I was introduced to you, I was introduced to, this is Dr. Greene. And so I never even knew you, you know what I'm saying? And so I was just like, well, I might be saying her name wrong. And then when we were in the meeting last week with Brisa, she called her name. So I was like, okay, it's Kyra. I wasn't sure if it was Kyra, but anyway.
Can somebody show me how to do a watch party?
Oh my goodness, Drew. Get it together.
Dude, for some reason, I want to get my...
We have a technical difficulties with Andrew.
I just want to figure it out.
I'm going to say hi to Perry.
Hey,
Diamond.
What's up? Hey, twin. What's up, Diamond? Perry, Dr. Greene, that's what I call her.
No.
So, real quick, can you take a little second and kind of let the people know that may not know you, who you are, and kind of what you do, and all that great stuff?
All right, well, I am currently the executive director at the Center on Policy Initiatives. CPI is a local, I call it the People's Think Tank. What we do is research about working families in San Diego. And our whole job is to make sure we both have the research part of that. We understand what the conditions are that are facing working families. We develop policy solutions. But the part that I also enjoy is that we do work to build coalitions to turn those ideas into real policy. Because a lot of people do a lot of thinking, but not a lot of action. And we are lucky because the way we get to do our work is in coalition with community organizations that have a grassroots base. They're based in neighborhoods, faith-based communities, or they're issue-based, but they have their base of folks that belong there, and we bring those folks together to develop policies in cities and counties, cities throughout the region and then the county. We are also part of a national network called the Partnership for Working Families. We have over 20 affiliates across the country. I'm the board chair for the partnership, which I'm really proud of, that these amazing leaders all over the country have chosen to let me sort of lead a little bit. And they do this work in regions all over the country.
So who's in the partnership? When you say the work, what does that necessarily mean?
So they do work similar to what we do at CPI, the Center on Policy Initiatives, but they do it across the country. So there are six affiliates in the state of California. There are affiliates in New York, in Arizona, in Colorado, in Washington State, in Nashville. We have a new affiliate. Chicago has an affiliate. So it's all over the country doing this type of work.
That's beautiful. Well, hey, Diamond. Well, I said hey, so she said hey back. Sorry. Yes, she's super dope. There's no question about that. So tell me, what's up?
Hey, Stony.
She is super dope, super duper dope. It was interesting to me. I was very hesitant to ask you to kind of be on with us because of the way that I viewed you, right? No, I'm just saying because number one, I respect your level of education. I respect the work that you do, the spaces that you're in, and I was a little intimidated. And so last week, our conversation, we had like 150 comments on our last conversation, and you and Brisa were asking and making comments and whatever, and then you and Drew became friends, and then Drew just asked if you'd be on with us, and you said yes, and I was like, oh, I clutched my pearls, like, are you serious?
Yes, listen. First of all, I have to say this. Hi, Mama. Hi, Mama.
Where's your mom? Hey, Mama Taylor. How you doing? All right.
I'm for the side. I got a fan. Hit that deal.
Wait a minute.
I didn't know. So I was like, how'd you find me? She was like, oh, I'm curious, Mom. Oh, okay.
If he creep in the DMs, you let me
I didn't know. Green light.
But part of the reason for that is that my mom, like one of the things I'm most proud of is that my mom always raised me that no matter what you do, you are good enough, but you are not better than other people. And that whatever talents you have, whatever they are, you're supposed to use them in service of your community. So for me, the thing that I'm most ashamed of is that my mom has the impression that I made anybody think that like you should be intimidated by me. We can't have conversation. We can't have fun together. We can't learn together. I feel like everybody in the world has something for me to learn from them. So I really am happy to be here. And I learned a lot last week when I was listening to you all have this conversation. So I was honored to be invited.
Yeah, I really appreciate it. And I have looked at some of the work that you've done since we met then. And a lot of it was like super like over my head. I didn't understand a lot of kind of what I was looking at. And there's a lot of information that's super important to us as citizens, and information that's gathered, but more importantly, probably decisions that are being made around us and for us, right? And about us that we just don't know. And I was like, wow. And that is very like intimidating. And to me, maybe not to Drew got a bachelor's degree, you're kind of smart. You're not the average bear.
Only on paper.
Only on paper, okay.
I'm a tester. I'm actually tested.
Okay.
Yeah. I have very important conversation skills.
Yes.
I haven't noticed that at all.
Hey,
That's not how it works.
Before we continue on, give us a little bit about how you ended up where you are right now. Let's do that. Yeah.
So I guess the background of it is that I was born in Memphis, Tennessee. My parents.
Orange Mound.
What do you know about Orange Mound? Okay. Okay. I see. We'll talk later.
Saratoga Street. Saratoga Street.
I feel like there's a story there.
Huge story.
No, we're gonna get into that. So my parents grew up there. They grew up down the street from each other, actually. They got pregnant with me in college. My dad got a job, and I grew up in Paducah, Kentucky. So, yeah, really.
So you were
I was born in Memphis. No, I was born in Memphis.
Oh,
I was
okay.
conceived in Martin, I'm pretty sure.
Mama, you ain't gotta answer that.
That's
You ain't gotta
right.
answer that.
That's
Nobody did.
That's,
Yeah, we could.
do whatever
we
you
could.
need to do.
Yeah.
But that's the impression I have.
Yeah.
Tom said Kentucky common sense.
That's right.
Uh,
Thank you, Tom. So,
What's up, Tom?
and then I grew up in Kentucky, and I lived there, went to school there. My family was still a lot of family in Memphis, so we went back and forth, and I visited a lot, but I grew up in Paducah. And I went to school there until I was a sophomore in high school.
Mm-hmm.
And then I got this thing in the mail that said I could go to college that fall
As a sophomore.
as a sophomore. So I am actually a high school dropout. I dropped out of high school and I went to this experimental college in Western Massachusetts. It was about 20 years old at that point. You go immediately to college.
So you 16 years old and just left us and just went to.
Just about to turn 16, and my mom
Yo.
generously let
oh,
me
your
go.
mom was unfit.
Well, you don't go from creeping in the DMs to calling my mama unfit.
I'm a hater.
Wow. Wow. She
Said
will.
something terrible.
And she already said I had TMI, so this is definitely.
Okay, Mama, we're really sorry.
I'm sorry.
We'll edit that part out.
We-
We're gonna edit that
16?
Wow.
You not smart, you gotta be
part. My sister was a 16-year-old college student too, but she didn't travel across country.
That's
The thing
crazy.
is, my grandmother took me there, and all my life growing up, my grandmother took us traveling. She wanted us to see the world, and she takes us out of the country, but she took us all over the country. And she, I don't know. My mom just felt like it was the right thing. I had been begging to go to
Obviously,
boarding
yes.
school.
Right.
I've been begging.
Right.
So this was an opportunity, and they let me go, and they made sure my grandma checked it out and took me there a couple times. But
Where was your grandmother?
my grandmother was living in Washington, D.C.
So it's not that far from.
No, it wasn't that
It's
far. It
probably halfway.
was like 7 hours.
Yeah, but you're 16. That's just amazing. It's amazing. I
Yeah,
think it's great.
no,
Crazy.
but my grandmother, you have to know this about my grandmother. She would have been an advocate for it in the first place. She lived in Memphis until I was about 11 or 12.
Mhm.
When she moved to D.C., she had my brother and me. Actually, we were younger than that. She moved to D.C. and she had my brother and me come out to visit her. And the first day we got there, she took us on the metro. She took us on a tour. She showed us everything. On the third day, she gave us money and a metro card and was like, have fun. And that's back in the day. There were no cell phones.
That was
like
really Chocolate City
Yeah.
too.
It was
It was Chocolate City in
And she
real
was
life.
like, this is how far you can go on the metro. Here are the stops you don't get off the train. If you go, you get here, you just turn around.
But you know what though? That really speaks to a different time where parents place like real responsibility on themselves.
That's right.
It was like sink or swim.
Well, I mean, that's true, although they gave us a lot of guidelines, and I think they paid attention to whether we were capable, but I think
Right.
it was definitely like, look, you got to make your way in this world, you have to grow up,
And I'm not gonna baby you.
and you don't get babied.
Right.
So you finished. So was that a 2-year college that you went to?
So,
was it a
Most
four-year
people,
university?
it's a 4-year, you get a BA, I got a bachelor's degree there.
By the time you was 20 years old, you got a bachelor's
Yeah,
degree.
it was
Shocking.
And so I met my husband there, by the way.
Okay.
He also went to college there. And a lot of people.
How old
think
was
that's-
he?
Is he older? Right.
I'm about to
We're
hate.
the same
Right.
age.
Okay.
We're the same
So he was 16 in college too?
Yeah.
Oh, so he just regular smart pants.
Yeah. No, I don't sell him that though.
And I
I
said,
don't
well,
agree with that.
that's
I
TMI.
never
That's
agree with
TMI.
that.
That's TMI.
He's a quite lovely average man, not quite as smart as me. I think that's all.
Let's just say
thing.
that. Okay. Yeah, no. I'm with that.
You're not better than me.
I mean, just
Just
this one.
gay.
That's fair. I'm not better, but just
I
smart.
love it.
I'm not better than you, just better off.
I love it.
Smart.
I
He's
love
got
it.
other talents. No, he's amazing. He really is.
You gonna make me start coughing on your elbow.
He's an artist.
Good.
He's literally an artist.
He's
So
creative.
he's very.
So
okay,
you
I'm not talking to you anymore.
so you went from 20 years old bachelor's degree to now because I know your bio.
Yeah.
So I just want, you know what I'm saying? I just want the people to know. And this is why I was intimidated.
No. What? So listen.
Where'd you go to what do you call that?
Undergrad.
No.
To graduate school.
Oh,
Yeah.
grad school.
I went to Stanford for graduate
Oh, okay. Then where'd you get your doctorate from?
school. From Stanford.
Oh, okay. So that's what we're doing now.
So
We just now we're in Silicon Valley just showing out.
well, no, not showing out. I mean, the other thing I will say about the thing I'm most proud of at Stanford is that there was a program to recruit students to go into PhD programs.
What years were you there?
A long time. I went there in 1995, And I
You're
finally,
married.
and
Was Tyrone Willingham there at the time?
yes, he was the football coach.
That's
Yes,
right.
yes, that's
So
right.
Stanford was really good for a few years in the mid to late 90s.
This is true. It's true. So no, I went to school there. It took me a long time because part of it is I didn't know what I was doing. I didn't know and it was also a really alienating place to be a young Black person in graduate school.
Right.
In the 90s.
In the 90s. And when I got there, there were 2 Black men in my PhD program. And I asked them if there had been African American women in this program before. And they could not think of a Black woman
That's crazy.
in the time that they had been.
What was your PhD program?
Sociology. So there may have been other Black women, but no one told me about them. No one introduced me to them. I later found out there was one who at least had gone there 10 years before. So I didn't know any other Black women. There were no other Black women in that department when I arrived.
Wow.
Not on the faculty, not graduate students. So it also took a long time, and one of the things I was proud of is there was a faculty member who got a grant to start a program to do recruitment of students of color into social science programs.
Wow.
And I got the opportunity to start that program and manage the first few years of it because I didn't want anybody else to experience the kind of alienation I had experienced in that program. So,
So what did that look like for implementing something that wasn't there before, then now
It was-
you're
yeah.
responsible for it?
I felt super proud to get to do it. I felt honored. As far as I know, the program still exists and is still supporting students. And that's one of the things I like to think about every place. I want to leave it a little better than I found it.
Right.
That's super obvious too. I mean, I think once we get into once we get into the work that you do here, helping to create and implement policies and look at, the data and stuff, I think people will see that. And it probably makes sense too, to me at least, that you, through social sciences, that you began to look at another way to exercise your degree and to do. And it's interesting because a lot of times, even with psychology and stuff, people think if you do psychology, you gotta, people be on the couch. But when you begin to dig into some of these issues, you realize that there's multiple ways that you can implement the information that you get and in the effects that information is having on the public. And I think it seems obvious that it created some kind of a passion in you to do something different, but maybe it didn't. How did you end up getting to CPI?
So I moved to San Diego because I got a job as an assistant professor at San Diego State.
Ooh,
And I taught-
go Aztecs, hashtag go Aztecs.
Yes.
All right,
So it was a great reason to come here
from Stanford,
from Stanford.
you came here.
Came here.
Okay.
And I had taught for a year at a school in New Jersey and come home. And, I did a little bit of everything in
Was
grad
that the late
school.
90s?
No, by this time it was the early 2000s.
So you're teaching in New Jersey,
And then I
get a
come
job
here.
at SDSU.
Did you teach sociology?
And in 2007, I moved here.
I wonder if Bikini, a girl named Bikini Cunningham. I wonder if she's a social scientist.
So did you know Nancy Fetterman?
Yes.
Nice lady.
Yes, she's one of my Facebook friends.
She was crazy about, she was a teacher at Mesa.
Oh,
She would get super passionate about stuff.
that's how I feel about it.
But
People
she's
like
not
that.
very big too.
She is very,
400 pounds.
but she is powerful.
Read this book. Test tomorrow. Ain't no class tomorrow. Well, test the next day. Hilarious.
She's definitely going to watch this.
Hilarious.
Yeah, she's going to come for you.
Nancy Fetterman, I was in class in the year 2000 at Mesa College.
All right. See?
Sociology 101.
So you're assistant professor at SDSU,
Mhm.
and then
So,
what happens?
and then what happens is that a couple things. So, actually, for me, my first year at SDSU, university just didn't even know how to handle it. They just were not clear about how to handle it. I had great students actually in my department, and some of my peers in my department were great, but it was a tough go. And during the recession, so we were on furlough. It was a little bit of everything. And so I worked really hard there. I loved a lot of things about it. And I met lots of people that I liked. And the thing is, what I realized about the work was I liked doing the research, but one of the challenges was I couldn't motivate myself to do it. Because when you do academic research, it ends up in these academic journals.
Sure.
Most people. I have a couple friends who are really successful at doing both academic sociology and getting that out to the public. But most people are publishing in journals and no one reads it. And it felt to me like, here's all this important knowledge that I didn't even need to create myself. It was already there, but people needed access to it in the way that you're describing. And so what I liked the most, I was teaching this class called, I taught 2 different types of classes that this happened. I taught this class called Wealth, Status, and Power, and it was about the economy from a sociological perspective. And the other was these classes on race. And I would often have my students would come and be like, I wish you could come to my job. I wish you could come to my dad's bar. I wish you could come to these places and like have these kind of conversations with people because I've learned so much about the world that I live in. I've changed my perspective. And that made me even more committed to wanting to do sociology that was out in the world. And while I was there, I have a colleague in that department. Her name is Dr. Jill Espenshade. She is still on the board of the Center on Policy Initiatives. And she does research every so often, every other year or so. She does a research project between her students there and produces research with CPI. And so I got to know about CPI through that work. And so when I didn't get tenure, and I had a new
tenure is you have to have a certain amount of, is it 10 years?
No, it was like my tenure review was after year 6. And they were like, this is it, you have one more year, you gotta figure it out, you gotta leave. So I was like, all right. And I had a newborn. I had a daughter, when I got this letter, I was on maternity leave, and I had a daughter who was a month old. So it was a tough go. And I was like, well, I don't want to move again. We just had a baby, we live here, my husband has a job that he loves. I was like, well, I just have to find a job here. And I kept saying, like, if only I could work at a place like CPI, like that's really what I want to do. So I tried some consulting work, but a job opened at CPI, I applied. I would like to say the people who interviewed me, Christy Hill and Peter Brownell, Dr. Peter Brownell, they were very generous because during that meeting, I said, it's the only interview I've ever had in my life where every single question I was like, no, I don't know how to do that. Nope, I've never done that before. And by the end of the interview, I literally turned to them and said, so you're probably wondering why I'm here because I'm kind of wondering why I'm here. So let me tell you why I think I'd be good at this job. And a variety of things happened. I mean, it's like some kind of like soap opera. Like I left the interview, got a phone call. My brother, who was just younger than me, I grew up with 2 younger brothers, had gotten really sick and was in the hospital. And like within the month after I applied there, he passed away. And I just wasn't focused on it, and I didn't call back, and I didn't follow up. And so the new year came around. This was like October. New year came around. I felt really bad that I hadn't followed up with him. And I called and said, look, I'm sorry I didn't follow up. I'm really embarrassed, but some things happened. Anyway, they were like, well, the job's still open. What? Yes, I would love to work there. So that is how I came to work at CPI. And that was in 2014.
2020, you're coming up on your 6-year anniversary.
6 years.
That sounds dope.
Yeah.
Super dope. And I, one of the things that it seems like life always teaches us is that, it's kind of like I always use this example because, I'm a Christian, so I read the Bible. And it's interesting how, like, I tell people a lot, like, you'll flip a page in the Bible and you'll flip 30 years in one flip.
Right.
And a lot of times I think people meet us and they see us and they see who you are now. And I think it's important to get to know people because it's encouraging to know that somebody's in a struggle right now. And it's like, none of this is making sense. And then they're going to say, okay, well, maybe if I just hold on a little longer, the direction that I wanted to go is not the direction that I'm going to go. There's nothing about my path that's leading me this way or whatever. So it's like, okay, sometimes you just got to hold on for the ride and then just get to where you're going to land. And it sounds like that's, I know there's a lot more nuance to your story. I totally get it, but it's just cool to see that you went through all that to end up where you are right now.
That's true. My dad used to always say to me, you should be prepared, right? You make a plan. But you make a plan and you don't count on that happening. And my life, I will say every single thing in my life is not what I planned. Like all the things that are the most important, except my daughter. She's the one time I planned the thing and it worked out. But everything else in my life has been, you keep preparing, you keep doing what's in front of you, and then you see that opportunity that's the thing.
That's great. Well, I'm glad that you had that experience. I'm glad that you're here. It's amazing. So I'd love to, Drew, do you have anything that you wanted to?
No, I just think that's
We was clowning the other day, and so I'm waiting on Drew to unleash.
Can you say something like funny now? On demand.
I love your lead press on nails. Show the camera.
Press on. If one pops off, what's gonna happen?
So we had a conversation the other day that was supposed to be like, hey, so here's what we're going to talk about. And
Drew would not stop talking.
Oh my goodness, 90 minutes later, and I'm on the ground having a connection laughing.
I'm sorry about that.
Poor Dr. Greene is like, what did I get my, and she's clowning too. I said, oh, this is
sorry about that.
Oh, you was clowning.
I'm sorry about
you might
that.
want to act like an executive director offline.
I'm sorry.
You know what I'm saying? We know. Or online, but we know.
No, I like to say it's just also to sit with someone who's well versed in the subject that you just read about, right? It's like
asking questions to someone who knows all the answers or can find the answers.
Yes.
You try your best to try to stump them and you can't, you know.
What?
Well,
You can definitely stump me because the world is full of problems we have not
I
solved
don't
yet.
know the questions. I don't know the questions to ask.
well, just for those of you who may be here, there's a link to the data that we're going to discuss, the specific data that we're going to discuss that comes from CPI, and the title is "County of San Diego Remains a County Filled with Inequality." And so we want to look at that because one of the things that you and I talked about that really makes a lot of sense to me is there's a lot of things that are going on around us on a daily basis that affect us, that influence us, that opens our eyes to stuff that's hidden from us. And a lot of it is because we're ignorant, I think, a lot of it, right? Sometimes willfully and sometimes not so willfully, right? So one of the things in looking through this report, I probably have a lot of questions, but if you just could kind of introduce how this particular report came about, why, and then maybe some of the implications of a report like this, and then we'll just kind of see how it goes, and then we'll ask questions. And we got a few things we're going to talk about tonight. One, the importance of data collection, which is what we'll talk about in this thing here. Equity and policy decisions, which is we'll get from this as well. And then I want to talk about the census, and then we have some other off-topic things that we're probably just going to throw up that will happen as well. Yeah. So basically, if you can, how did this particular report come about, and and just kind of go.
So this report is
she's waiting.
No, Diamond is ridiculous.
She would make a great election. Well, we know that.
I would not.
Yes, I would love that. We would love that comment.
Yeah.
No, because look, I'm going to tell the truth tonight, and you'll see why I would not make a good elected official.
But the people want the truth.
Yeah, we'll see.
Yeah.
We'll see about that.
So never mind. This is Chaz.
Wow.
What's up, Chaz? This is my bro Chaz. He was supposed to be. I don't even know what this. He was supposed to be here tonight, but because of the outbreak, he was actually had a flight to come. He was actually going to come here for the show, say what's up and leave. But his parents are a little bit older, and so he was like, I don't want to take no chances of getting my parents sick and just whatever. So he decided that. But if he was here right now, he is completely turned. Like Drew is turned up, but he's completely turned up. This dude right here. Yeah.
So I just want to say on behalf of the U.S. Census, just this one time, they just count the people who exist, just those people.
Okay. Just so you know. Just so you know. Yeah.
These things are based on people who exist. One person.
That's funny.
Let me just before you continue, let me just say this too. Listen, ladies and gentlemen, one of the things we guaranteed Dr. Greene was that we weren't going to
Yes.
Drew and myself, we wasn't gonna go. We'll go wherever she wants to go. I just want to say for the record, we are now responsible for whatever ends up in the comments.
Wait, you're not responsible for the internet?
No.
Fair enough.
So, and Dr. Greene did not agree to any of the comments, any of the commentary, none of that. We are only responsible for what we say. She is here to talk about CPI, data, the census, whatever, all the other shenanigans. She did not know about any of it. I just want to put that out there. You're not going to get my sister close up.
To have a job when the
pandemic is over.
When the quarantine is lifted.
I don't know.
Be able to go back to
But I love that you denied so many comments that we've even denied my mom and said she loved it.
That's true. That's true.
No,
her mama loves her. Her mama does love her. You know what I'm saying? So how did this? Because this is important. You guys can pull this document up in that link in the description here too, if you want.
So this report, we do a report like this about every other year.
A report like this
one about the county. And it's a report about inequality in the county. We use census data and we summarize what's happening in terms of income, poverty, income, and earnings for the most part. It's our focus. This is part of a series of 5 reports that'll happen. So there's one on the county, there'll be one on the city of San Diego, and then there will be 3 regional ones for the rest of the county. So there'll be a North County report, East County, and South Bay. Okay. And part of that is because it's one of the few sources where you can also get this level of information at small city level. So you can look at what's happening in El Cajon, what's happening in Chula Vista, which I think in San Diego, we often forget those places when we talk about the county. We talk about the county.
We're thinking about the city of San Diego.
Exactly.
The big
that's it. And the majority of people in our county actually don't live in the city of San Diego. So we have to remember that when we're talking about what's happening.
In the city of San Diego, we got about 1.6, 1.7 million people, 3 times that in the county.
No, there's about twice as much.
Just twice? I thought it was.
It's a little under half of the population lives in the city, so like about 40-45%. And then,
Interesting.
yeah.
I thought it was more than that. I thought it was 3.3 million in the county.
So then that would be about.
I guess, yeah, okay, I'm sorry. What, the 0.7 thing kind of threw me off, I'm sorry, yes.
That's all right.
About half, so I'm right, 3.3, my math was off.
Yeah.
I said I had a GED last week, and you brought that up.
I did.
To my attention.
So you actually have.
Right. You like to remind people of their failures?
No, you're
it's
having
great.
associates.
No.
By the way, I have a GED too.
You got a GED?
Yes, I do.
Well, I have an
Yes, I do.
associate's degree, she has a doctorate.
Is literally responsible for the numbers.
I'm responsible. That's
Okay.
what I'm
So you're
Literally.
That's
So
my
here we
job. So this report is about inequality in the county. And so the thing it looks at is, one of the things that's important is that there are official poverty numbers that the federal government uses. And to just give you an example, in this report, it points out that the poverty threshold, so when you hear people talk about like how many people live in poverty, when the federal government gives that number, for a single person, if you make more than $12,784, according to the government, you don't live in poverty.
Wait, say that
If
again.
you are one person and you make, I'm gonna say the number that would be, if you made $12,785, according to the federal government, you are not living in poverty.
And so it's funny because that number is the general national number.
Right.
That is like, what are you talking about? Maybe if you live in like Ogie from Muskogee somewhere, you're like doing all right.
Maybe, but I doubt it.
Wow.
And for a family of 4, that number, the poverty level, is if you're making $25,701. If you make over that, you are not living in poverty. So obviously, when we look at the poverty numbers in this report for San Diego County, what we're talking about is deep poverty. When we say how many San Diegans live in poverty according to the federal number.
Mm-hmm.
We also use another number we call the economic hardship number. We double the poverty number, and that's used by the state of California because it's a high-cost area for a lot of programs, eligibility and stuff like that, so that's economic hardship. But you can still imagine, if you're a single person living in San Diego and you make $25,568.
You need to make that a month.
It's just about, right? So that's just to give us a sense of economic hardship. And so we are tracking this over time.
Wait, so just hold on, let's not, just real quick. The national, so our government, when our government talks about poverty, it's saying if you make $12,784,
If you're a single person.
if you're one person that makes almost, we'll just say close to 13,000.
Yep, you live by yourself. You
That's
make,
a little over $1,000 a month.
Yes, that you're,
that if you made $1,500,
You're doing all right.
you're fine. You're not living in poverty.
That's $750
So-
every 2 weeks.
so our
taxes.
government nationally says, and this is why we're gonna get to these policies and stuff and how this stuff makes sense. Like, I don't think people, see, those are things that I didn't know until I started. I was like, wait a minute, you 12,000, who can do, I don't know anywhere in the United States where you can live for $12,000 a year.
Yeah, right.
That's $1,000 and some change every single month. I'm like, what? And these are the numbers that when they start talking about poverty and all this, these are the numbers that they use. These are national statistics from the census that talk about unbelievable.
But you know how people make that work? 5 and 6 of them live in the same house.
This is true. This is why you get overcrowding when people are poor. This is why you get all of these other things. People are, doing what they have to do to make ends meet.
Yeah.
But even if we use that number, so remember for a family of 4, it's closer to $25,000. So when we look at it, this is what I want to give an example of. In San Diego County, one of the numbers that I think is incredibly important is the childhood poverty rate. How many children live in a household that's making under this federal poverty threshold?
Right.
In San Diego County in 2018, and can I say something about that for a second? Why is it 2018? So people always are like, can you give us new data? I mean, it's 2020,
2 years.
but it's also this reason. So in order to do research, you have to wait for the thing to happen, right? You can't study it before it's over.
Wait for 2019
So
to
you
end.
gotta wait for it to do 2018 data. You gotta wait for 2018 to end. Then you have to wait for the data scientists to compile the data in 2019 and then give it to you, right?
Right.
So you always have a lag in
Sure.
your data.
So yes, you can get your data as it's developing.
Yes.
People are like, well, it's 2020, you're 2018.
What happened last month? I'm like, I don't know. It just finished happening.
So, and that's
We'll
part of
get back
that.
to you
Some
on
of the
that.
ignorance is purely just people just are truly ignorant, just don't understand, like don't even have the cognitive ability to go, oh wait, it's 2020, 2019 just finished. They still have to get the data because they don't know what's going to happen in the year unless you're forecasting, which doesn't help, and people don't know that.
So this is, especially so that we can do it for the smaller cities, it takes a while to have a sample that's big enough over the time to do that. So going back to childhood poverty, in 2018, 17% of children in San Diego County lived in a household that was below whatever their household size was, whatever the number of kids and adults in their households, whatever that threshold was. And you have a measure of what that looks like for one person or for 4 people. 17% of children live below that in San Diego County in 2018. But one of the things we do is we break that out by race. Because often people talk about that in San Diego County. They might talk about childhood poverty, but they don't talk about the racial disparities in childhood poverty.
Do you think that there's a reason that they don't, or like,
not
are you allowed
everybody
to talk about that?
Yeah, I absolutely can. At the Center of Policy Issues, we are focused on making sure that racial equity is part of what we do. And we understand that because we live in a system that is white supremacist. Like, it is based on the idea that, like, the experiences of white people sort of define what's happening in this country. And if you are not intentional about talking about the experiences of people of color, it will not happen, and you will not get policy that focuses on the needs of communities of color. And I'm allowed to say that. Everybody on the board agrees with that. That's an understanding.
That's good.
And our staff.
Thank you.
So just to take that number, so 17.1%. So who is that?
Because that seems like that's not that big of a deal.
I mean, I'm still worried that 1 in 5 kids almost, 1 in 6 kids.
But 17% seems like that's not that big of a deal. You still got 83% left, you know what I mean? That's right. When you look at that, but when you look at the details of the numbers, like, oh.
And you have to understand, that's just the federal poverty number. But that is 32% of Black children live in a household that's living in poverty.
17% of the children living in houses of poverty, 17% equates to 32%.
So when you take that 17%, the way you get it is you take all the households, you don't differentiate by race, you put everybody in the same bucket and you say what percentage of all the households is that? And that's 17%.
So we're looking at
everybody.
We're looking at 3.3 million households.
You're taking a sample.
However much you're giving, you're trying to get a wide swath
exactly.
of the general public to get, okay.
So that's when you don't differentiate by race, you just take all the racial categories. What that tells you is that there are going to be some racial categories that are below that number and some that are above. So for white children, only 9.5% of them live in poverty in San Diego County. That's still 10%. That's not nothing. That is an important thing to deal with.
Right.
But for Black kids, it was 3 times that what it was for white kids. So 31%. For Native kids, it's 30%. I mean, part of the story in San Diego County is also about jobs. I mean, people can talk about everything else, but most people in San Diego County who are living in poverty also work. And that is critical. That's work. And
Wait, say that again?
So the majority of people who live in poverty work.
So it's not true that when you look at poverty and you realize, and then you don't even consider the data, right. Most people just assume that Black people are the worst because that's just what America has always told people, is that Black people are lazy, don't work. The reason why you're poor is because you don't work. But the data actually says that of the people that work, and you don't get to decide who you guys cast a net. You don't go up. Let's focus on the people that are working.
We don't even collect these data. These are census. This is from the U.S.
You see what I'm saying? And so it's not true. Just that data point alone allows us to know that Black people are not lazy and not doing nothing.
Often what the challenge is that people don't have, and they may not be working full time because they can't get full time hours. And when they work, they get paid less, right? We're going to look at some of those other numbers.
And that was stark when I looked at that. The gender gap is wicked.
The race and gender gap around wages is like, I mean, it's insane. And
I was like, ooh.
And the thing is, the reason that's important is because, again, and this came up in a lot of debate around the presidential issue, which is, some people will spend some time looking at debates tonight, is that you have to have policies that acknowledge that just solving the problem, just addressing poverty, it doesn't have the same impact in different communities. I just want to also name that the Native American number is nearly the same as for African Americans or for Black folks in this region. And the rate for Latinx folks is about double what it is for white folks. So this is what inequality looks like at a racial level. And what's important to us, we often focus on the childhood poverty rate because we know that there are impacts of growing up in poverty. right? That those are long-standing, they affect young people for a long time. And so for us, it's really important. And also, no matter what you think, even to your point, about even if people believe somebody's lazy, they don't want to work, the question of why you would let children exist in that situation, right? Like why you wouldn't help out their families, because those children are innocent.
Right.
Even though I don't agree with that negative, assessment of families of color, but in particular, the fact that this exists for children is, critical. That's something that we deal with. And it impacts, so how do we think about that in terms of policy? I'm gonna give a couple examples about why that matters. One, right now, we have to think about that in terms of school outcomes. We're not sending everybody to school with food, with clothing, with all of their needs. And kids are coming to school with different sort of needs in their school system. And we don't have an ability to say, we know that's true, we want to target programs, and we do sometimes. But we want to be focused more on targeting programs in the communities that need it the most, in ways that those communities want to receive those services, right? That meet their needs. The other thing is like during this economic, like right now, during this response to coronavirus, who's going to struggle more? Poor people are going to struggle. And now we know that there are racial differences in who those poor people are and how they're going to struggle. And so we're lucky to live in a community where there are people of color actually actively trying to address this. But without that, if you think that policy, in some places, the people who are responsible for enacting the policy are not people of color, don't know much about people of color, and most of the people who need the services are, then it makes it clear why you need to do community-based policy making, where you need to go to communities and have people weigh in because they know their experiences, and right now, the way our power structure is structured, they're not necessarily the voices at the table.
It's interesting because, like, when you think about, and sorry about the background noise too, there was a gender reveal at the complex, and you guys are probably going to hear background noise. We apologize for that, the noise in the background. It's interesting that when you look at the way the coronavirus is affecting poor people, the more things, like, let's just say, okay, first of all, say like just the coronavirus in general, people getting sick. Okay, if one person gets sick and is removed from the home or whatever, it causes an avalanche of things to happen. But now you start saying, okay, well now people are going to be telecommuting from home. Well, depending on the sector that you work in, which is also a racial thing, your sector might not even have the opportunity to work from home. So now you face a whole nother issue with not even being able to be home. Now the schools are closed, and so now you have a child who's home that is going to be home. You don't have any support, and you can't telecommute from home, and so you're like, well, what do I do? So, and this is one of the things that we talked about. You see a lot of, I see it could be because I'm in a vacuum in my social media, but a lot of white people are like, close the schools down, our kids need to be home. And I'm like, yeah, but that's because you got somebody, or you can be there with them. Like you're most likely in an industry that is going to allow you to be home, where it's not going to create a hardship for you or whatever. What do you do with the people who are not working as doctors, nurses, whatever, but people who are in a service-based industry that, or even has a small business, or like, what do you do with that? It ain't just close the schools down, protect yourselves, and that kind of thing happens. And now you get to see that people who have the ability to have the privilege, like I tell people, for me, like by the grace of God, for the last 12, 13 years, my wife has been a stay-at-home mom. So kids can be home for 6 months, it don't matter to us, right? But I know that that's a privilege that I have that is not afforded by most of the people. And so I realized as soon as they said the schools was closed, the first thing I asked was, Tasha Williamson had a Facebook Live about that. That was one of the questions. What are the kids of color gonna do when they shut the schools down? Who's gonna watch them kids? And it's like, man, but people just do stuff like that and they don't even consider how it's gonna affect poor people. It's never, or people, and let's not even say poor people. How about people who are doing well that still live in a service-based industry that now it's gonna affect them and now it's gonna put them in a different arena where you're not gonna do. So I'm just like, man, all of this stuff makes a huge difference. So it's bigger than just making a policy. Sometimes it's about the hearts of people being able to understand the effects of these things and how it applies to Black people specifically, but people of color generally.
I think that's fair.
Sorry for being so verbose.
No. No, I mean, I want to say there are people out thinking about this, right? So I know for a fact that the San Diego for Every Child initiative is working with the
San Diego for Every Child initiative.
Mhm.
Okay.
is working with the YMCA to help get childcare for low-income families, people who have to report.
Shout out to Jackie Robinson,
Yeah.
YMCA honor,
Yes,
new
exactly.
executive director. Shout out.
So they're working with them for the YMCA childcare program to try to figure out how to match funds.
Okay.
But one, people have to know where to look, right? So they have to be able to find it. And what I want to say is that it's not when you have the crisis. It's like what I think this highlights is how our system is broken every day, right? Because to go back to your point, Drew, like, first of all, the first way I think it affects people is, so everyone's talking about, like, you know, you're going to be in your homes together, but if you're overcrowded in your homes because you're trying to make ends meet, you've got lots of families living together,
Right.
and that's fine. We like multi-generational families,
Right, sure.
but when they have space to be together. So people are at more risk, right, of passing the virus if they have it because they're in close quarters and because they don't have the option for necessarily being able to isolate a family member, all those things. Because we already start out in the system that says we aren't worried about the fact that we aren't ensuring that families have enough food at home every day. We're not ensuring that people have enough money to have decent housing every day.
Right.
And so this only highlights for us that those challenges exist, but they exist every day. If you're a parent working in the same industry and you have a sick child, like, not the whole system's sick, your kid just gets sick. Just today, you have to go to work.
Erica, your kid's the only one in the school that gotta go home.
Where do they go?
Where they going?
Right?
Right.
Where can they go? Where can you send them? What can you do? And this is why it's so important to have paid sick leave, which was one of the policies we really fought for. We fought as an organization to raise the minimum wage and to ensure that every San Diegan who worked full-time had access to at least 3 paid sick days. Eventually we got a state bill that said 5 paid sick days, people could earn up to 5. But that was like a critical thing. And now we're seeing that people push
5 a year.
a year. But to think about the fact that we have industries where some industries we depend on, where the typical situation is that you don't accrue any sick days.
Wow.
Unless there's a state law that makes it that happen.
Was that you that just posted something? And you just posted an article about that.
That's right.
Today or yesterday. Some article. Yeah, I was reading. I was like, okay.
Yeah, but like for across the country, I mean, California's ahead of it. It was a hard fight to get to it. But in most parts of the country, people who work in retail industry and fast food and all those, they don't have a guarantee of earning sick days. And think about what that means, that it's the people making the lowest salaries, so who need to go to work. They
That are
need every
getting
day.
in the $12,000 a year who are really in that category.
Yeah.
And now you gotta stay home and take care of your kid,
Or you don't.
and then your kid ends up somewhere else, who knows where.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Or you're probably in those kind of situations where, you know, maybe you wouldn't want grandma to have to take care of a sick kid because, again, without
Your
the
grandma's 75 years old, you don't want to get her sick of anything, not just, let alone coronavirus. You don't even want your grandmother to get the common cold.
But that's what I'm saying. We're doing that every day. But long before coronavirus, we have situations where people are exposing elderly folks and other, right? Because they have to, because we don't have a safety net that really protects people. We don't really think through that. And we have a workforce where there are more and more women. Not that women are the only people who provide.
Sure. But more so.
Right.
Generally speaking.
Still.
I want to say this too, man, just because one of the things I thought about when you were just saying that, as we're talking about this, let's also, I want to brag about a lot of mothers who don't have a lot of means. Shout out to the mothers that do a lot with a little. Shout out to the moms who do what they can to find the programs and to find the things that their children need. Shout out to the mothers who take their lunch break to go take their kid to do this, and they will take certain jobs or work certain hours or do certain things to be able to make sure that they are able to do the best that they can with the little bit that they have. Shout out to all the mothers, and specifically the Black mamas out here. I want to shout out to the Black mothers who are out here doing what they do, that oftentimes get labeled as welfare queens and all kinds of other stuff like that. So shout out to Black mamas, all mamas in general that are doing what they can for their kids, specifically poor mothers, or generally poor mothers, specifically Black mothers. Shout out to y'all for doing the things that you need to do to make things happen, because it is harder. And I just think that that's important. But the fact that they have to do that is a problem.
And
that you do it is great. Yeah. That you do it is incredible. But the fact that you have to do it is tragic.
Yeah, and I think, like, people, for me, one of the goals is we stop shouting out. Sorry. And we start doing something about it. We start standing up and we start fighting so that people have access to these things. Because I will say
with CPI.
with CPI,
This is the action.
this is the action. Like it's coming to the space when we're putting out calls to say, hey, we're going to move a policy to improve sick leave. We don't have, by the way, Don was pointing out, like we should expand it. We should have healthcare. Tom was talking about healthcare for all, right? These are real things, and right now, most people, if we're telling the truth, they don't do a shout out when we're talking about it. They're like, those people should get better jobs.
Right.
Those people should go back to school and get more education. And that is the one thing I detest that when people say. Because I used to say this when I was teaching. Take that to it's kind of absurd, right? But people do this all the time in philosophy. Take it to the extreme. Let's say every single person went and got a PhD, right?
What does it matter?
We're still gonna have to. We still have to take out. We have trash. We still have kids that need taken care of. We still
Still need firefighters.
we do. Right?
Shout out to the firefighters,
right.
whoever y'all are. You guys are the real heroes. I don't know who's listening right now that might, or anybody knows a firefighter, but shout out to the firefighters. They put their lives on line every day. If any of y'all listening, then shout out to y'all. Shout out to the firefighters. Hug a firefighter. After the corona, elbow a firefighter now. But I just want to.
Like you asked for elbow. Wait, I'm asking. You said elbow.
Is this what executive directors with PhDs do? They elbow people.
I'm trying to ask the question.
So
Ms. Perry's story told me I could if I wanted to.
Perry, I'm surprised she haven't put up the little baby slap, because every day she finds a reason. I can share my heart. I can say, my best friend died today, and Perry is going.
That's not true.
No. Don't you let her off.
Listen, that's not true.
Perry is.
No.
Perry, you are so beautiful. You're amazing. But every single day, that little baby makes it into my comment section and smacks me. And I don't care what I could be talking about.
You see, he's over here trying to say it like, when I say nice things, she'll give him love, and then he
follow right back up with the baby with the New York Yankees shirt on or whatever he got on in his diaper.
Because you always taking another step.
See, always protect the black. Is that what we do?
That's what I always do.
I like
That's what I do every day.
Let me look at the comments. We want people to feel like it's good that you're watching. I don't know how to make these bigger. Let me see if I can do it.
Can you not see?
No, I don't mean big. I can spread them out though.
I want to
Let me
weigh in on something that you said. You said about people.
I'm coming, y'all.
One thing I thought was interesting was that $13,000 or $12,000 something. That's literally $7 an hour.
If you're working full time.
If you're working 40 hours a week.
Right. And what the challenge in a lot of places, so I'll give you another policy that we've been trying to work on, which is ensuring that people who work at a job, if your employer wants to add a new person, that they offer those hours to their existing employees so that those people can get to full time before they hire another part-time person, right? Because that's exactly one of the ways that you get people who are working, but still not able to make ends meet. Because we know legally in the state of California, you can't be paying people $7 an hour.
Right.
So that's not.
Was it like 13 or something?
So you're either paying them under the cover. I'm gonna get it wrong. We're working our way to 15. I think we're at $12.50. We just had a. But
go ahead. I'm sorry.
But so we have to make sure that people are getting full-time hours, right? Because when they're not, and here's the other thing, we also want to work on a policy around fair schedule. Another way that people get stuck in a job where they can't get ahead of that is you get a job, you get your schedule, and this is happening on college campuses, everywhere. You get your schedule on Saturday for a week that starts on Sunday. Right? If you don't have your schedule in advance, how could you, if you have that job and it's a part-time job and they're giving you your schedule with 24 hours in advance or 48 and it changes every week, how could you have a second job? You can't. Because you can't guarantee the other employer that you can show up for the hours that they give you. So we need policies that ensure that when people are trying to work, trying to make ends meet, we got to lift up the salaries they have, but we also have to make the system actually responsive to allow people to succeed in that.
Well, it's funny because people will say, well, minimum wage is not supposed to be, you're not supposed to be able to live on minimum wage. And it's like, dude, we're not talking $45 an hour. We're talking about at least get it to where a person could at least have a roommate and still not have to sleep outside. So,
that's crazy. I read a comment like that the other day, and it was like, minimum wage is There's like, oh, that's for high school kids. And I had to educate them, like, actually, it ain't. Do you understand where minimum wage comes from?
Right.
And the dude was like, no. Then I had to remind them of the nature of our country's history as it related to guaranteeing wage inequality for people of color, namely African Americans.
Specifically.
But do you know that, so I want to tell you, by the way, it's $12 for companies that are under 25 employees and 13 for companies 25 employees.
$12 an hour for companies who are under
25
employees and 13
for large companies.
So yeah.
You know, the first job, $4.25.
So
$3.35 an hour was my first job.
So I want to talk about that because this is the state of California.
That was back when cigarettes was 85 cents a pack.
Right. I bet.
You ain't got much older than me though.
I am.
Man,
How old are you?
14.
I'm 49. I'll be 50 this year. This is a long time.
No, 43 this year.
I'll be 50. 7 years.
So you born 1970. So how old you got your first job?
I was 16, working at Taco Bell in Phoenix, Arizona.
3:35.
And I used to go in the back and put my hand in the cheese and eat cheese. I used to steal the cheese from them.
Wow.
Hey, the time of what's that
Okay.
called?
Wow.
What is that called?
I don't. Nasty. I believe is what it's
Yeah, look at the nachos. Look at the nachos, Bill.
called.
I would recommend against that.
Statute of limitations is over. I can't.
I would recommend against that.
And that was when I discovered I had a love for cheese.
You know, I had a job. I was selling clothes. Shout out to Fresh Image and Marketing. But I had a job.
Illinois.
Yep, I had a job at the Burger King that was in our local Canterbury Shopping Center mall. My boy Lucius, shout out to Big Vincent, got me the job in there, $4.25 an hour, and he literally let me work from 8 to midnight. Literally 8 p.m. to midnight, just because I wanted to have a job making money so I could have some money to save so I could buy stuff. You know, like my graduation gown, stuff like that. But my boy, he literally lived around the corner. His mom was the candy lady on our street. Used to hook it up.
Yes.
So
wait, I want to come back to this though about like policy in this country around wages. So it still is the case in this country that there are a set of people who do not have to be paid minimum wage.
there are people that do not have to be paid a minimum
They have
wage.
a lower minimum wage, and that is tipped workers in most of this country.
Tipped workers.
Oh yeah.
So right, so they don't right. So they don't need. So the assumption there is that they don't even have to pay. I mean, in California, that's not true. In California, there's no separate tipped wage. But in other parts of the country, that's an actual thing. And why is that? Who are the kind of people who you have historically served as servers in restaurants?
Black people. American descendants of slavery, specifically.
But also in places out here, like in the West, Latinx folks too, right? Who were excluded from access to decent wages. So that used to be, and in California, that used to be true for farm workers, for.
Happens to be not invited to the cookout. Gross.
Anyway,
I know, listen.
that's when I put on my white hat.
Listen,
I come in and shut it down.
To be fair, most hardworking people in the industry are not nasty, do not put their hands in the cheese.
Dude, I was 16 years old.
Right, and that's why we want adults to work in our
Nah,
restaurants.
if you don't
That's
think,
why when people say that's a job for kids, you just are the poster child for why you want grown people to serve your food.
I used to, and I was around.
I used to worse than the senior citizen working fast food.
Well, okay, so can we ask a question? No. Like, actually, I want to talk about that. Why do you think that is?
Because.
And don't say that stupid. The
No.
ignorance say something dumb. I can tell by the look in his eyes.
No, but he's saying
I
something
think
that a lot of people say.
I think about that stuff and I'll be like, man, you should be retired at the house.
Oh, okay.
See?
You should.
That's not what he really
Because
wants.
my walk into fast foods are some pimple-faced geek. You think you ordered? Yeah, chump. Let me get a call.
Not chump.
Well, you know.
Listen,
Talk about the big
roughing up the children.
Yeah, chump.
Okay, all right.
Yes, the people look brother every day.
Really?
Terrible. Simon, what up, baby? Every day.
It comes for you.
We used to box every day at 6 p.m.
And then you went like all black man already, right? Like
I used
chump.
to box.
Like who calls people chump?
I used to box
Do you call
my big
people
brother.
Jack? Do you go around? Well, that's what's up, Jack. Is that what?
Sometimes.
Yep. See, I
See,
knew.
Drew, for the last 20 years, Drew has been between 230 pounds and 260 pounds for the last 20 years. And I'm talking about solid, like, so Drew is able, was able, has been able, will be able to say things to people that a guy like me that's 202 pounds of mostly head and ears.
I was 202 in high school.
Yeah. So let's go to some of these comments real quick. So Tasha put a link on here, theguardian.com. We are still here. I'm assuming this is Native American things because it says hyphen native. And then she says they have child care for those who have to go to work. Centers and others are staying open for those who cannot take off work. Yeah. So you can look at the Guardian. It'll show. I don't know where it's actually. I'm following the link.
Put that on.
It's in there. She put the link in the comments. Then she said there's also going to be a lockdown soon. And that's one of the things that the governor just put out today about the coronavirus. Governor Newsom said that he wants bars and all these other things to like close down. I want to say this real quick. I posted this earlier. I was talking to my homeboy that's incarcerated, and he was like, "Man, do you realize that an entire country or Italy got put on house arrest without one gun? There was no force used, and everybody is sequestered and forced to stay." And he just said, think about this. People gave up their rights voluntarily. Without a fight. And I just want to say that because, and especially again, just because of my belief system and, this whole idea of the end times. I'm not trying to be like a scary end times guy, but it just sort of really makes you think when you start talking about the setup for something and how America in general has been so cold-blooded. I always tell people, remember, this government is run by people who are the same age as my father, who just passed away, who was 87 years old, who was like treated very horribly. And they're so the people who are making those rules back then are still alive, and their children are now making the rules. So I just like America's very wicked. I don't put anything past America because it's the same people that said we love Jesus. They had slave ships that was called Jesus, and you know what I mean. And they killed people and they raped women and did all that, and then they prayed and went to church or whatever. But so I say I don't put nothing past America, and I don't see anything wrong with the idea that what we could be being set up for, based on what I believe, what we're being set up for is a mass takeover. Like the government is working itself for the ability to be able to take people over. And just last thing I'll say, think about this. When you look at what a lot of people are doing is, and especially people who go to church, are not willing to look at Trump and what he's doing. They're not willing to admit that he's a liar, that he supports racist ideologies, that he's a womanizer, that he's sexist, that he's homophobic, he's Islamophobic, he's all, and even if he doesn't personally subscribe to those things, he supports it. He's a dog whistler. His base are people who go to church every Sunday and throw their hands in the air, that are complaining about everything that is happening because so many of them are privileged, and so many have the opportunity to not be faced with the same trauma that the people that they say get out of the country. We've been allowed to say Mexican people are rapists and terrorists and doing all this stuff. Meanwhile, all of the terrorism that's happened in America that we know of has happened by white men that have killed multiple. So I'm just like, all of this stuff that America's doing, man, is just unbelievable. And I've been thinking about that all day. Sorry to go on a tangent.
No.
No, there's just I think it's ironic and certainly contradictory when you really look at what the narrative that's being pushed compared to what actually happened, right? And what it continues to happen.
So I want to say this. I think we actually have a medical crisis on our hands, right? I think this is really happening.
Of course.
But I hear your point, so I want to just acknowledge that. But I think that you can talk about the fact that that's real and talk about people taking advantage of that. We have whole books about this idea that people engage in like disaster capitalism, that there's takeovers after.
Look at all the people that they pulled up at the press conferences that the president had. All the people that run those companies are old, rich white people, or not old, but rich white people.
But I want to say, but a lot of the people who support this administration are not rich.
Of course not, which is crazy.
But I don't know that it's crazy because here's what I think is important. All of us are working from a place of fear.
Okay.
And that's that's the thing that really divides us. If you had a system, like part of what is happening, I think, is that part of holding some racial groups down, it leaves an example to everybody of like, this is what can happen to you. This is what the system could do to you. And that's true. And then that's true within our categories of people. Like we're all afraid, right? Like I think all the time, I have a good job, I'm well paid for my job, right? But I'm scared of retirement. What if something happened to my husband? Could me and my daughter make it? Could we survive? Like living like that is, I think, part of what makes people become willing to tolerate all kinds of other things. And that's what's true in this moment too. Like that, every time you hit that note of fear, every time you make people insecure, what it does is help divide us.
So it's a need-based tolerance. That's kind of what you're saying.
It's like a fear. Like when people are afraid, what do?
Whatever is necessary.
Exactly.
I can tell you one thing too. And then I'm gonna get to some comments out there. Interesting. I learned something out in my political philosophy in college is people need somebody to blame, right? So not only this whole fear-based and all such jazz, but people need someone to look down on. They need somebody to blame for their social condition. And I think that was what Trump really kind of allowed people to do. They got people from Mississippi and Arkansas believing that all these illegal immigrants is your real threat. That's your real problem. You ain't got no teeth in your mouth.
I mean, but to come back to that, like again and again, my point is, why do people, Drew, what you said, there's an assumption there.
Mm-hmm.
We need somebody to blame because we assume the system has to be broken, right? I only need somebody to blame if something's wrong. And that's the thing I think is transformative. If we can imagine, which some people do, right? They're like, right.
No, the reason I'm not where I want to be is because of this works for this group.
Exactly.
That's why.
But if I actually turned that around and said, this system is broken, and if this system wasn't broken, I wouldn't need to blame anybody.
But the problem though is just like we talked about earlier, when you're calling wrong right and right wrong, that's what's happening. It's not you. I'm talking about people. So you put out this data, and people will ignore the actual facts, and they'll go with how they feel, even though it is completely and utterly asinine. They will go with how they feel. And that's one of the problems. And that's one of the biggest problems to me with American evangelicals is that you're willing to forfeit truth so that you can stay comfortable. Somebody said this too, and I don't know what y'all think, but somebody said this too, like at the end of the day, there are certain white people who, and I would imagine that it's those white people who, regardless if they are poor, don't have good dental, running around without shoes, babies, whatever, living at home with 50 people, because of the image of black people in general that has been pushed on America, those type of people say, I might be that, but at least I ain't black. I might be poor as hell, but I ain't black. And so, think about, like, what would make you vote, of all people. And I understand people are saying the Affordable Care Act, aka Obamacare. I understand people are saying, this is very expensive for me, but if you're poor, it ain't very expensive, right? If you're poor, it's very free, it's very affordable. If you're poor, and poor people are voting against it, even though you don't even have.
But then I want to say about people who are doing all right. Whenever they say it's very expensive for me, I'm like, it's not more expensive than the current system we have if you actually get cancer. Right? It's not more expensive. Like people are losing their homes. Like, and like the idea that like somehow we assume, and I have no idea. Think about that for a minute. Like those things are fairly common in our world. They happen all the time. And yet people are like, well, I don't want to have to pay for this insurance.
I made a post about that, and someone about Obamacare, because it was about, or even healthcare. It was about look at your quarantine, and you want to cancel Obamacare, whatever. And someone was like, quarantine or whatever has nothing to do with Obamacare. Well, I said, investigating infectious diseases is a function of healthcare, right? And it just so happens, I wouldn't call it bad luck, Trump canceled that program. He ended it. 99% of it, right? He had opened like 50 offices and closed 47 of them. or something along those lines. I just thought it was crazy, and then I got into a nice little had dialogue about Obamacare and all this other stuff, and I was like, yeah, it's not without flaws, but what it really did is guaranteed health care to people with pre-existing medical conditions, because before they could say we're going to deny you because you have this going on right here. And my friend Rob, who I worked with for about a year, was like, Obamacare saved my life. I had kidney issues and I got a transplant because of Obamacare, right?
So see, they won't put those things on there again, because as long as we can find somebody to blame, that goes back to Adam and Eve.
Oh, it's even worse though. The issue is you got people with more money than common sense making choices on your behalf. Because it's like the politician or the lobbyist, whoever is voting for that, they're not worried about getting sick and not having to deal with that.
Well, all the people who are making those policies got health care.
Exactly.
Everybody that's in the Senate, all the people that are in politics got health care.
But it's not just that. There's a set of people who make a profit off of sick people.
Of course.
We have a system. I mean, like, we have a system that says you should get insurance, but then you should try as hard as you can not to actually pay out that insurance, because how else are you going to make a profit as an insurance company?
A cure for cancer is too expensive. I'm talking about to the people who would lose their profits. It would cost them too much to have a cure.
I mean,
right, because they make money on you being sick.
It's a cure for everything. You look at, like, even with what's going on with the opioids. One of the largest manufacturers, and I want to say the Koch brothers, but I don't think that's it. But there's a family that is doing a lot of the OxyContin, like that's their thing. Billions of dollars of Oxy every year. So on one hand, and there's a documentary called The Pharmacist, that's phenomenal. On one hand, they're making all these opioids, pumping them into the system or whatever. People are illegally selling them and not going to prison and all that. And then on the other hand, the same company got a treatment. They've invested in treatment facilities. So not only are you creating drug addicts, but then you also get to treat them with the same money.
The pain management centers and all that.
Unbelievable.
And to bring it all the way around, why are people becoming addicted to opioids? They're solving problems around fear. They're solving problems around deprivation. They're solving problems often about pain and needing to go to work despite being in pain, right? Which is another reason why people seek out these medications. And so I just think, like, to think about a system that treats working people with respect and build a system around that, about helping people. And when I say working people, the other thing I want to be clear about is, it is not that every single person has to have a job all the time, right? We have people with disabilities. We have people who, for whatever reason, need to be out of the workforce. But when I think of working families, I'm saying people who right now in this system, they have to go to work in order to make ends meet, right? And there are people who don't. They're like, Michael Bloomberg doesn't have to show up to do a job to make money. Bill Gates doesn't have to go to work. These are people who make money off of money. And that is what billionaires in this country are, for the most part, right? They're not people who have to go to work every day. And that's true for a lot of millionaires, not all of them.
Bloomberg's paying for people to go to work. He was paying his entry-level canvassers or organizers $72,000 a year.
Isn't that crazy?
But here's what I bet you.
Because he could afford to.
But I bet you this. I bet you at the place where, like, so Bloomberg has these machines, right? Which is what he sells technology. I bet you there are people, I'm willing to bet, who work in janitorial services in the facilities that manufacturers who
Are poverty.
are living in poverty.
Of course.
Right?
Why? Because that's how he gets to make his money.
Right, because he doesn't have to think about the fact that, like, if you look at your company, one of your first goals is to make sure that everybody who works there has a decent standard of living. Like, imagine if that's what we held these people accountable to, and it would be shameful to show your face in public if you were not doing that, right? And instead, we have a system that, like, way back before he became president, Donald Trump was on TV fake firing people from fake jobs, right?
You're fired.
Right.
With his hair like this.
Like, what? But think about that. What does it mean to be working people watching a show about the thing that for any one of us would be the worst thing that could happen to you? If you showed up for work, and we've turned it into entertainment, because there is a way that all of these narratives actually get us to turn against ourselves.
Right.
And so what we can point at these other people who are crazy for voting, but think about that whole system. It's a whole lot of people who used to watch him firing people, right? Who didn't think about the ways in which they were already complicit in a system that does not respect them.
Unbelievable. Well, you want to get to some of the comments, and then I want to finish with the data, and I want to talk about the census.
Yeah.
There's like 18 who gonna show us.
I know.
Tasha said they have cures for cancer and AIDS, and I fully agree. Diamond Tier said you're right. And then it was basically people just talking about
She said, Drew, say that again.
you got people with money, lobbying on your behalf, making decisions about your health care, and you never got to deal with the ramifications of the very decisions and policies that they put in place. Why? Because they don't have to, they're not subject to the same, treatment and, standard of healthcare that you, the constituent, is. But yet they want you to believe that, Obamacare or affordable healthcare, if you will, it does more harm than good. And I think that's crazy because one life saved to me is worth it. So what? You don't get the tax credit or whatever. Deal with it. I got a friend named Rob Newton, friend of mine, who's alive today. And he was like, yep, Obamacare, XYZ.
And to your point about coronavirus, if everybody has access to health care and everybody's going in when they feel unwell, being checked out, then that's how the epidemiologists, those other people who look at to see if pandemics are developing, they need people coming in and reporting symptoms.
Right.
But we live in a country that discourages people from getting health care. I'm scared every time I go to think about this. Every time you go to the doctor, you're like, I don't know what the bill will be. I don't know. Right? Like, I have no idea.
But that's cultural too. You see, me, you black.
I understand what you're saying. It's not nice, but I'm
Ginger ale works.
Ginger ale?
Yes.
Ginger?
So when you was growing up, how did you deal with sickness, Drew?
You wouldn't lay down. When you drink this ginger ale, go lay down. And that's it.
And that Lysol can?
Oh,
Was it
bleach.
gold?
My mom was a pine soil. I'm not lying when you say that. Pine soil.
Y'all not gonna make, y'all not, so.
I didn't, it's just him.
No.
I'm just saying.
Why you say me and you is black? What happened to me?
These lights are awfully bright.
Wow.
You see?
Wow.
Cause, man, the ginger ale works for black folks, man. It's scientifically proven to cure anything.
So how do I get fixed?
You have to burn some sage. You are white, so you have to burn some sage and
Hey, last week,
which is healing crystals.
I feel like
crystals
he implies that you are like definitely like maybe you're Rachel Dolezal, like maybe you're 100% not black and just pretending. So do you have any evidence to to this data point to help?
Do I have evidence?
Yes.
Evidence that I'm not white?
Not on
Just all the way white?
Yeah.
I am half white.
Not on
My mother was white, but she's dead now. So my mother is nothing. She's been dead long enough that her body's completely decomposed. So she doesn't have any color right now.
So I feel
But when she was alive, my mother was very pale.
Okay.
She was a true white woman.
Yes.
And my father just died. That's okay. Great.
Did you see that movie,
Appreciate that.
That mom in the movie, the crazy one, that's his mom.
Really?
Where they put the little zapper up and shot the brain out looking. Yeah.
This is what
So
I'm talking about.
my dad was black. My dad was. I tell people this all the time. I tell this all the time to people, man. Drew is the type of friend that, first of all, when we first met, he came to my house for Thanksgiving because he was out here with no family. And he made fun of my mama and all that, and everybody's cooking. He was at the Thanksgiving table.
Oh, the food was delicious. The food was delicious.
My mother-in-law was there too. You know what I mean?
She
So
had sweet potatoes with marshmallows in it.
Why are you making that face? That's totally normal. Yes.
Yeah, but you can't.
My mama makes sweet potato casserole with marshmallows on top.
Well, I had it, and they had marshmallows on it. I was like, what is this?
Really?
Yeah.
What did you think it was, though?
I didn't know what it was. I've never seen that before in my life.
I think we should take a poll on this because I feel like this is
We
a sort of
should.
deal.
We'll put a poll up.
Mother was like, oh, here we go. Yeah, tuna, green bean casserole, some other stuff.
You know, I did. I will admit, growing up, we didn't have a whole lot of potions, little things like that.
That's crazy.
Like tussin and all that. I actually got to go to the doctor. I don't know if that's typical or not. Is that atypical? Is that an atypical experience based on YouTube?
I was going to say, I got to go to the doctor, but that's because my dad belonged to a union, and so we had health care.
Did you hear that, Tom? Her dad belonged to a union. He had health care. Therefore, she was able to go to the doctor because her father was in the union.
That's right.
That's why we push union jobs, homework, union, 1U, San Diego Building Construction Trades Council, and every other union in the entire world. Thank you for what you do.
Now that being said, before we went to the doctor,
Yeah.
my mama would, and she can just do it out. She said, but like she would put like Vicks vapor rub on your feet.
Yeah.
And tell you to put it on the sock. The sock trying to get under the covers and sweat it out.
Man,
Like she had a lot of sweated out cures, and they were. I still do. I'm not gonna lie. I still do them. I'm like, oh, I feel a little itch in my throat. Let's put these socks on and see what happens.
You know what?
What? It works.
I don't want to get to where it was at the other day. And I can see when I start laughing right now. This light really makes me look really red.
I will say this though. My mother was the kind of person, like, if you weren't bleeding to death, go, let's first of all stop bleeding on my carpet. You have medical emergency, you go do that in the kitchen on the tile. You go stand in the kitchen and tell me how bad you are. And don't come into my front door. Yeah, we wouldn't do it, because we had the old school window AC, and we had a sheet.
A sheet.
That blocked the air from going into the kitchen and into the back. So I'm not lying, it was a sheet, and that was the cold barrier. So we would come to the front, like, Mom, what's wrong? Oh, I broke my clavicle. Well, don't bleed on the carpet.
I will say, when I first drove Drew out when we went to college.
Man, we had a good time.
And we get there at 2 o'clock in the morning, 3 o'clock in the morning, or whatever in Chicago. And the first thing he was telling me all these stories about his parents, and it was too wild. It's just no way that anybody's parents really do the things that he said. And so 3 o'clock in the morning, his folks come down, hey baby, blah blah blah. And his dad comes up to me, and he's looking at me, and he was like, he said, what is you? I said, first of all, get your hands off me. You know what I'm saying? Golly. I said, what do you mean? You said what? No, I didn't say nothing. Sir, what do you mean by that? And then and then he started wanting to play. And he wanted to play the fallback game. He said, come on, Drew.
What is you?
I said, boy, I'll tell you.
So I have a story about that. So my husband is white.
Yeah.
He went home with me to my family in Tennessee, and my great-grandmother was light in New York.
Okay.
So, and at the time, my grandfather had moved back in with my great-grandmother, so my grandfather was living there, so we went to the house. And so I'm talking to my husband later, and he's like, that lady who takes care of your grandfather. And I'm like, his mama? And he was like, no, the white lady. And I was like, my great-grandmother? He was like, no, she was like a white lady. I was like, she wasn't.
See? Y'all need to stop judging people based on what you see.
You never know.
Exactly.
You never know.
That's why you got to keep everything neutral.
That's
You
right.
know for sure what you're dealing with.
Right.
And then you get the clown.
And then you get roasted.
Chad says, with regard to wages, I do think it's healthy. It's healthy as incentive and motivation to allow people to be poor, have less, and aspire to learn better. The problem is the billionaires that soak up everything and control government. So he's saying it's healthy and it's an incentive. People being poor, that it creates a drive in them. And I think that that's true for some. And I think you can't make a statement like that and just let it apply to everybody, because everybody comes to that particular circumstance with a different set.
And I don't agree with this at all.
So here's what he said, though, at the same time. It's kind of like, what was your first car? You remember?
A Volkswagen.
Was a piece, right? What was your first car?
Well, my first car was a Nissan Sentra.
Oh, nice. 2.4.
It was $4.
Was it a piece or was it an awesome car?
It was an awesome car, but I was like 25.
Oh, wow.
Like, I mean, I was a little.
Well, the car you have before 21 ain't never supposed to be nice. Why? Because imagine if you'd have like a collector's item or an awesome car. You wouldn't appreciate the same thing as if you had like a beater first, and then you graduate and work your way up and just have something nice.
So let me say two things. Because we never say that about rich people. Like when we turn around and say, well, like then people shouldn't inherit. If that's true, then people should never inherit money. Like why would you ever inherit money? But some of the same people will be like, oh, you can't take people's money from them. Well, they didn't earn it. Their parents earned it. Their grandparents earned it. So one, we have that side of it. that we let rich people give their people money and they don't have to work for it, so they do have their first car.
Perpetuity thing.
But I want to say this, I do not believe that it is true that people need incentive to be productive. And the reason I don't believe it, and I've said this from the time I first when I was doing sociology, like there's a question, because people are saying something about human nature. And the idea that they're saying is that people need competition, and they need deprivation in order to inspire them. But I think if you look at babies, you don't starve a baby to get them to have inspiration to do the right thing.
Well,
right?
according to Drew, his parents did that.
That's true, and look how he turned out. So I'm saying feed your babies.
So
I'm saying that,
Yeah.
that actually people have an innate desire. Like there's something about being a human being that's a desire to create, to do, to be loved and accepted by other people. And sometimes the way we do that is through our service to other folks. And I would actually argue that this system actually corrupts them. Right? It gets you to the place where you look at little kids, like as soon as they realize that you're supposed to be earning money for stuff, my own daughter who loves to help people, she's like, but are you gonna pay me? Right. So there's actually a way to think about it the other way, that it turns everything into a commodity. It turns every relationship into that, living in this type of system.
I think on top of that though, and Chaz told me to read, I won't tell you exactly what he said, he just texted me. And he said, read the whole thing. So I'm gonna read it again.
Okay.
I'm gonna read it again. So you guys can see it, it's right here. With regard to wages, I do think it's healthy as incentive and motivation to allow them to be poor, have less, and aspire to be, do, and learn better. Earn better. The problem is the billionaires that soak up everything and control government. That's everything. We just talked about that. Yes. I think so. I agree that the problem, and I did read the whole thing, so I'm not quite sure what he's talking about. And I'm gonna put your text on social media. That's how you say something like that to me. The problem is he would have said this live. That's why, in a way, I'm kind of glad he's not here, because he would have said what he said in my text messages live, and then we'd be like, how we're gonna explain this. But my problem, and I agree, rich people corrupt everything, right? Because power corrupts, absolute power corrupts, absolutely. People always say the love of money is the root of all evil. That's not true. I mean, money is not the root of all evil. The love of money is. True. And that's where people fall into problems, is that they love money and begin to do everything they can to get it. Here's my problem, though, with the whole you should work to stuff. That I believe, as with most of the philosophies that we inherit, comes as a result of us being cultured a particular way because we're poor. So you say that naturally, or not naturally, but in America, by and large, American descendants of slavery, people of color, everybody up until this point now, starting with black families, were poor, and so you need to work for it, because that's what. And so you work for your first home, you do that. But rich people actually don't do that. Rich people actually teach their children. I'm not saying all rich people, because Warren Buffett, who's arguably one of the richest men in the world, doesn't give an inheritance. He pays for, I watched the documentary, he pays for his kids' college, or for the people in his family's college, and that's it. They don't get millions of dollars from him or anything. He says, earn your own money. So there are some people who just don't believe in doing that, and they're gonna die and give all their money to a charity. So that's not true that all rich people do that, but by and large, wealth transfer, when you start talking about leaving wealth for your children, which goes back to what we talked about originally, the reasons why a lot of us feel the way that we do is because we know that we won't be able to provide those things for our kids anyway. So you make an excuse as to why they're not going to get it, instead of just saying, like, based on what we have, based on our circumstance, there's a good chance that you're never going to be a multimillionaire, because their opportunities to do that just aren't really there in regular working class American situations. And so if 95% of the wealth in America is owned by white people that pass those things down to their children, and the people who are at the lowest end of the spectrum when it comes to finances are black people. I'm going to read something to you that comes from What We Get Wrong About Closing the Racial Wealth Gap. And I'll call you just a second, Chaz. He's going to want to add his commentary. But it's What We Get Wrong About Closing the Racial Wealth Gap, that's done by Sandy Darity and some other folks from Duke University. And the 99th percentile black family, is worth a mere $1 $1,574,000. The 95th percentile, the black families that are at the 95th percentile, 99th, percentile, are worth 1.5 roughly million.
1%.
Yes. While the 99th percentile white family is worth over 12 million. So the black families that are at the 1% of America, the black families worth 1.5 million. The 1% of the wealthiest are at 1.5 million. The 99% white family is worth $12 million. So when you look at, so there's 12 times the amount of wealth for the white family, for the richest white family, than for the richest black family, right? And then it says, this means over 870,000 white families, 870,000, almost 900, almost a million white families have a net worth above $1 million. 870,000 white families in the U.S. have a net worth above $12 million. While out of the 20 million black families, there's 20 million black families in America. Fewer than 380,000 are even worth a single $1 million. 800. So when you start looking at, so that's why it's important when we start looking at like wealth in black communities. That what you always say is, look at Oprah, look at Michael Jordan, look at him. Look. All families, there are 870 out of 870,000 white families have 12 million. Out of the 20 million black families, not even 400,000 of them have even a single $1 million. And so Oprah and them they are the outliers of the outliers. And so you go, look, you got rich black people. And so we don't understand that, number one, we're not even a large percentage of the American people in general. And we don't have any of the wealth. Why? Because slavery, Jim Crow, redlining, all these things, white people came to America, took the land, cordoned off the land, just started taking parcels of land. There's 3 families, I think it is, Ted Turner owns, I think he owns 2/3 of the land in America. Something ridiculous. He owns like a ton of money. And so you look at there's no ability for families to pull themselves up by their bootstraps, because that's not what white families do that have money. They pass the money down to their children. They leave a legacy, which is, and I can't think of, what's the word when you pass down money to your family? You leave not an inheritance. It's when you share your wealth. What is that called? When you pass your wealth down to your family, whatever the word is called, I can't think of it. And that's what happens. Black families don't have the ability to do that. So when you start talking about, man, we have to live in a particular way that we're like, well, you ain't gonna get no car, son. If you can't go out and get a job, you gotta get an old raggedy car, and you gotta work 10 times harder. We just push that narrative to black people because that's what we've had to do. That's part of the survival mechanism. And let me just finish this thing right here. So 870 white families have a net worth of about $12 million, while out of the 20 million black families in America, fewer than 380 are even worth a single million. By comparison, over 13 million of the total 85 million white families are millionaires or better. So when you start talking about, the reason why black people are so what it knows is because there's a history, a legacy of black people out of the picture or whatever, and making it work, which I'm going to get to some of these statistics too, so that we don't forget. We went all so far out there.
I mean, listen, people can look at these studies
I
and
like
ask
it.
other questions.
I like it.
We want to make sure, but I want to say this, the other thing is black people have gotten tricked about where our wealth comes from. When I was teaching, people would always be like, well, what about these athletes? And I would always say, what is the lifespan of the average professional athlete?
6 years, I believe.
In which sports though?
Exactly.
Right.
And football is 4,
Right.
3.5.
And with
Generational wealth.
Right.
Thank you.
And within 2 years, over half of those folks are bankrupt, are living, right? So, because part of it is when you sign a big contract and you're making $3 million.
Right.
That seems like a lot of money if you've come from nothing. That whole thing is that it gives you incentive. But the problem is that the CEO of the company who's making $3 million, they don't have a 5-year lifespan. They don't have 6 years to make that money. They're making that money over a productive life, right? And so, and they have a golden parachute for when they retire. Like when we're looking at the ways that Black people typically, the models that people put up of how we gain wealth, they're not sustainable in the first place. Right. And that's why, as a community, it's nothing wrong with thinking about how we do this thing, but we should also acknowledge that a lot of that comes out of the fear that the system won't take care of us, so we have to take care of ourselves. And I think that's not wrong. I just think we should also invest in that this is our country. Like, it belongs to us. We built it, and have a right to share in the prosperity of it.
I like it. Tom says, damn right. That was, she is still white. I hate all of you. Tasha said, my mama's still white. I hate all of you. Drew, what have you laugh fighting here? I went to the doctor because my mom and dad worked in hospitals. I had insurance because my grandfather was an insurance salesperson. That's good stuff. Your mama's laughing. Hey, mama, she's still laughing. She said, yeah, I'm not 100% sure. Okay. Lee, you better put alcohol on it. Drink ginger ale and go lay down. That's what Dinah said. That's funny. What's the testimony? It's not a sin or a crime to be poor. Work minimum wage job your entire life. It is, however, a problem to do so and not have done your all to change that. It invalidates and dishonors those that did. It's a bit more nuanced, but all in all, it serves a purpose in this system under which we find ourselves. This is Chaz. Hunger and cold is one of the best motivators for innovation and perseverance. I will say that, like, I agree with that. And he's on the phone here, and here's why I say that. And he's on the phone, we'll let him get a chance to hash out his comment. But I do think there is something about the willingness to struggle. My point is that not everybody shows up to the race with the same abilities to be able to do that.
I just disagree. Like, when you think about the people who've been innovators, like when people point out Bill Gates, when was he hungry? When was he cold? Like, people actually don't.
He got famous.
He was not.
I'm saying he's the son of a carpenter.
Yeah,
but he wasn't hungry. But like, you don't have to be poor.
But think about the Black athletes that were hungry and just said, man, I'm gonna stay up all night. Or you had to do some things to get to where you were supposed to be.
But to be fair, those things did not come out of, like, I will have to say this in terms of honoring folks. I did not spend hungry nights. I did not have to, right? Like, and that's not the only way to motivate folks. It's not the primary way to motivate folks. And in fact, that's what I'm saying. You cannot learn when you're hungry. You cannot learn when you're scared. You cannot learn, like, your brain literally becomes focused on meeting those needs. And so it's just not accurate.
Did you know what though? Like, I do believe that, need or necessity is the, mother of all kinds of stuff. Like, if you need something, need to, necessity is the mother of all inventions, they say.
But it doesn't matter, because we also live in a system where, even when that's true, we will criminalize people's innovation. We will criminalize their. So, like,
if the government can't get their slice of it, absolutely.
So, I mean, I think to say people up in the system that says you should work hard, you should strive, your deprivation is what's actually going to be your motivation. We have data about that. We can look at what happens to poor kids in intergenerational mobility. Right. And the reality is that's not what happens. It's not this motivation that leads you to become rich. It is the rich stay rich and the poor stay poor.
Chaz, what do you want to say about this, bro?
Hey, are you guys able to hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Yes.
All right. First, let me say I'm honored to be on from Arizona. I really wanted to be there, but I didn't want to bring the Arizona coronavirus to California and have a mix. I don't know what that would do. But
the Arizona coronavirus? Arizona corona?
I think Arizona and California coronavirus makes Nevada coronavirus.
They call it the Corazona virus.
Do not think you all should be giving any medical anything.
Oh, the doctor is telling us that you can't label.
So I was being like very free with the stars. When I say innovative, I didn't really mean innovative, and it's like so nuanced. But first I want to say, when we talk about it's not all, certainly it's not all, but not everybody in this system, in this economy, in this society, or any other, not everybody is going to be invited to the party, so we have to be okay with that. Second, there's way more white people that, if we're gonna use, like, say, race, there's way more white people that make disproportionately minimum wage
Kyra.
I think when we talk about like a racial disparity versus numbers, I mean, it's a whole different ball of wax. But just with regard to wages, the problem is it's disingenuous to talk about, much like Bernie Sanders does as a black man, to talk about wages from the bottom. Because the bottom line is, if you pay the lowest earners more, all of those wages are just going to be passed on to the consumer. The people that now make more, like let's use a number, if you make 10 and now you make 15 an hour, everything is going to be priced so that you really don't make 15 an hour. Right? That Big Mac.
Oh, that's inflation.
On a scale, you're never going to make more because the big corporations are not going to absorb that loss. They're not going to absorb it. They're going to pass it on to the rest of us. So now you make 15, but proportionally, contractually, you still make 10. It's a myth. The only way that you can change things would be from the top down.
Now, Dr. Greene studies this stuff. I want her to rebut that real quick.
I feel like a lot of people make that argument that if you raise the minimum wage, you just raise price. I just want to say a couple things. One, one of the things I love about being a sociologist is that you also get to study history. Like everybody talks about, everyone knows this actually, that if we look at the value of the minimum wage in 1970, right, it was worth more than what it's worth now.
Right.
And yet that was a period of time where people were expanding the middle class. So it's not just the case, but I agree, you can't just do that. But I just want to acknowledge, like we have a history of having the minimum wage be worth more than it is now, without it being a system where everybody can't afford to get a Big Mac. Like that is actually just the opposite. We invented going to fast food restaurants and eating out and developed the middle class after World War II, precisely because we lifted the bottom. The other thing that we did though is that we taxed people. We taxed wealthy people to put their share back into the system. So there is a need to do both things, but where we broke the system, we broke it at both ends at the same time. So if you look at the Reagan administration, they came in and what they promised people is that you could have even more. And what you had to do was you had to let rich people get more money, right? And then they would innovate and it would all trickle down.
With tax cuts.
With tax cuts and all of those things, and it would trickle down. And at the same time, they said, and you have to stop these workers from having so many rights. You have to stop people from going on strike. You have to break down the unions. You have to stop their political power. And that is how we ended up in this problem. So to say, I totally agree, you have to tackle both ends of the problem, but I think that it creates the first side of it has to be saying that our intention is to make sure that low-income people have more money in their pockets.
Right.
And we have to expand the middle class. We can do those things. We've done them before. That's the other thing I wanted to do. We've done this before. This is not, I'm not saying it was perfect because there was plenty of racism. It did not happen for everybody at the same rate. But even in that period, this is true, we have to have affirmative action. If you look at the package of things we did, we raised wages for the lowest set of wage earners. We had affirmative action programs to ensure that Black families had access to opportunity inside their system. And that was the period where we created the greatest amount of wealth in Black communities, and it was intentional, the decision to reverse that, precisely because it was effective.
So,
well,
but you know, I think that that's important that these things are talked about because there are a lot of people who say a lot of stuff and don't even know and again, that's how these myths get spread across, and people across the U.S. go, poor people just, and it's like, that's not even true. The history doesn't even support what you're saying, but because we live on hashtags and memes now, you don't have to, some of you people have been posting on Facebook, I'm about to ask you to cite a source if you post something again. Look how many people get their information about coronavirus from uncorroborated sources and stuff.
But then this is where I still have to defend the young people and their hashtags and the whole but this misinformation didn't start with the internet, right? People have been giving a narrative. Anywhere we see information, we still have to be critical. Like, who is this? Do they serve our interest? Are they fair? Are they right? That has always been a challenge, and it's always been possible for the rich and powerful to buy, I don't know, like Bloomberg, a lot of ads and tell lies about what you do.
Almost $500,000
And then say whatever you want to about how the system works and what your own personal story is. So we have to be critical, and we can't say that things have gotten harder. I will acknowledge that with the internet, but people have been telling things that are not true, and we should be honest about that too.
That's good.
I agree. Well,
look at that. You want to talk about my shirt a little bit, just to lighten things up? You got something to say?
Yeah,
You got something to say about
bought a blazer, and the liner of my blazer matched your.
You said the liner of my blazer.
Yeah, that's a smock. I think that's a lab coat that you got on.
I appreciate it.
And you look beautiful.
I'm the doctor.
That's
I'm the
right.
doctor. That's why I came to do this.
That's right. That's
Tom says, pass on to the consumer. WTF. Corporations and CEO earnings are at all-time highs. Blaming workers is a cop-out. 100%.
Can we talk
100%.
about how Dr. Kyra's shirt matches the carpet at laser tag?
Listen, I was just hoping I could confuse the two of
You
you.
look nice. I thought we was playing laser tag.
I mean,
You okay,
Matches
Taz?
the carpet at laser tag.
laser tag.
I just think
But
it's
I wonder,
beautiful.
when did you get laser tag money?
That's laser tag.
Right.
You've been playing laser tag as a grown man, haven't you?
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Jason, we listen to her with her around. You need to keep her.
Hey,
No,
Jason. Hey, but Chaz, we're gonna talk about how Dr. Kyra's. Hey, we're gonna talk about how Dr. Kyra's shirt matched the seats on the party bus. I didn't mean that. I didn't mean that. I thought somebody ordered a 30-passenger party bus. The little inserts on the middle. That's what it looked like. I was like, man, let's go. I'm ready to go. I'm trying to do that.
Yeah.
Drew's over here faking college degrees from
Right.
University of Miami, like.
Never even been before. I never even been before. I never even been before. I got a Miami shirt on. Hey, I only got this because it's my favorite. I'm sorry. I only rock it because someone I care about, or a person that got me this. And it's orange. And she got it because she knows orange is my favorite color.
Yeah.
But
Man,
man,
so that's fun.
I
So,
love that.
so there's a couple comments in it. I want to talk about the census
Yes.
before we shut down.
Then we can redesign the bowling alley.
I was asking the first one.
That girl got the bowling alley carpet shirt on from the bowling alley.
Hey, so they're right here. They're what Dr. Greene said, and then
My favorite comments.
they said that's a good campaign. And then Tom says, Diamond, let's do it. You know what I'm saying? And Tasha says,
Yeah.
Unions.
yeah,
Yes.
of course she knows everybody.
No,
She knows everybody.
I got Tom.
And Diamond is in the political sphere as well.
Nice. We
Diamond
should have
is-
her out here.
What's that? Oh, she'll come. Yeah, for sure. I'm sure she.
You should.
Yeah, we've got to have her to talk. All things that spaces that we need to be in. Tasha says, Chaz, there has to be greater opportunity of equity for those on the bottom of the wages.
Then I like
Some poor people work 2 low-paid jobs and still stay on the poverty line. Very true. Very true. Drew is stupid. Laser tag better be at the facility you sitting in, and all that it costs.
Oh, wow.
She said, in the complex that you live in, you better have laser tag here, is what
That's
Tasha
good
said.
stuff. Why don't you gotta be personal?
You know, all of a sudden we gonna get our feelings hurt. You know, so one of the things, I just wanted to,
Absolutely right.
I want to,
I'm struggling on response to something.
allegedly.
But I do like to point out though that after this, we're gonna go out and get us a big bag of Cool Ranch Doritos to match that shirt. Please do.
So-
you play this arena every evening right here.
I'll be here until Thursday.
Ladies and gentlemen,
The veal Parmesan is delicious.
allegedly. You know, if we could, because I think one of the things I think is really important, we have the census coming up. It comes up every 10 years.
Right.
And that's something that I heard you speak about that at the, not A. Philip Randolph, but the labor group. You came to the labor meeting. That was the first time I realized that you were actually involved in it. I can't think of
I
what
was like, well, which one was it?
it was with Satomi and them down at the union,
Ah,
at the union hall. I can't remember the name.
the CBTU.
Yes, CBTU. So, but we talked about
Yes.
the census and why it's so.
Tom, come on, Tom.
He said, "Wow, Drew, Cool Ranch. That's okay, baby. You still cute." That's what her mama said. Mama said, "That's all right, baby." You still cute. And Tom said, "Wow, Drew, Cool Ranch. Like
And can Perry go
Google
through with
that
that slap
image.
for Drew?
Pull that
Gary,
up.
don't put that slap in the comments.
Give it
'cause
to
I'm
Drew.
calling the police.
Give
Pull
it
up,
to Drew.
pull up Cool Ranch Dorito
Listen,
right now.
I'm done with you.
No, you look me. I'm just a little hungry. I want some snacks, finger foods.
Comfort foods.
I do want to talk about the census.
So can you kind
Jump
of, so we, people give us a little, kind of talking, I want to spend the rest of our time talking about that, about the census. So lead this particular conversation and we'll go wherever you go.
People have to fill out their census forms.
Why?
The number one reason is, first of all, let me say this. This whole report we've been talking about, this is based on census data. And then you sample based on every 10 year, the decennial census. So when you don't get those numbers right, you don't sample correctly. We can do some corrections, right? But like this census is like, this is it. And it's how we determine congressional districts. It's redistricting is shaped by who fills out the census and how. When we have a different Supreme Court and we actually start protecting voter rights again, we need accurate data about where people live in order to protect those rights. And I think, I say this all the time, and also I can't imagine a situation where Black people would not fill out the census. I really
cannot imagine a situation.
I cannot imagine why we would not, because the thing about this country, if we wanted to take a stance, this country said that it would count us when we, right, in slavery, but it would count us as 3/5 of the person. And there's an opportunity to stand up and be fully counted. And the other way you can get counted as 3/5 of a person is if you undercount your community, right? So like, to be clear, we want the full count, and especially in places like San Diego, where we're a small percentage of the population, failure to count people is a huge issue, and we are one of the communities that's undercounted. There are others. There are children, under 5.
Let's focus on our, can we just focus on our, because I know everybody else got issues, but can we focus on our, I think that's.
And I think this is critical because this outreach, and I'm really proud of the fact that we live in a community where a group of organizations got together and said that they were going to focus on making sure they got an accurate count of Black people in this region. And I think that is—
Shout out to Layla and all the other ones that's out there doing
Chris,
work.
all of them.
Chris, everybody's doing work.
Yeah.
Shout out to you.
Amazing. Because I think that it is intentional. Like, you cannot solve problems you do not count. You cannot understand the condition of folks that you don't recognize are here in this country. And an example of that, one of the reasons I'm super happy that includes people working with Black refugees and immigrants, is because in the conversation, say, around immigration, there's a way that our community doesn't get included in that, as if there are no Black immigrants, as if there are no, right? So all of these are things that we help clarify to get an accurate census count. And so I just think like and there's a reason why the Trump administration did not, and all the other places didn't invest in it, did not invest early on in making sure that they tested the census forms, especially because now this year, this is super important.
Right.
We have an online census. So I got my census form. Have you filled out yours? Did you do it?
Carol, shout out to Carol Kim that posted that. She said, y'all sequestered in the house, doing what you're doing. She said, fill out so I clicked on it, and it was, is this actually the census form? I didn't do it because I wasn't 100% sure.
You're going to get something in the mail. It's going to give you a code that's distinct to your household. It's going to tell you to go onto the website, enter that code, and then it's going to ask you a series of questions. I did mine yesterday because I saw Diamond post that actually.
Shout out to Diamond.
And I was like, that's right. I have my census, and mine came in the mail. Sat down, filled it out, counted everybody in my household, classified them by race, talked about age of every member of the household. This is just, it's not hard, but what's also going to be needed, I think, for the folks doing this work is we know that we are in danger of undercounting our elderly folks, right? Because they also are going to get this thing in the mail that says go online.
They're going to be like, what is that?
Right. So
we're in a system right now, we're in a time now where who knows, with the coronavirus happening, who knows what's going to happen. And people's only access to internet might be at school, at work, at the library.
So the census forms have just come out in the mail. They're asking you questions about April 1st. Then there will be a series, at least before we had coronavirus. The idea is that there would be, when we know households have not responded, there would be census workers who come door to door, make sure that people fill it out.
Okay.
I am not sure what's going to happen in terms of making sure that we get it. And we're required constitutionally to do a census every 10 years. So, like, for once, probably Donald Trump will have to follow the Constitution. So this has to be done. So this is why it's critical for you to call every person you know here or anywhere else in this country and make sure that they have gotten it, walk them through how to do it, support them getting counted in the census.
See, this is what's so crazy about this whole thing that's going on with the pandemic. It's like, and this is why trust is such a big deal, because you're like, man, people are like, man, y'all, you trying to keep us from not voting, you trying to keep us from not being counted, you trying to do all this stuff, they're getting richer. And it's like, man, and this could really be a real issue when people are like, man, there's something, and we already not trusting folks in general, and now you got these shenanigans going on, man, get out of here. So
I think that's true. I used to talk to people all the time about, why do Black people believe in conspiracy theories? I'm like, we believe in conspiracy theories because we've been victims of conspiracies. Like, the Tuskegee experiment was like, when you say to people, when I would go around when I was in college and tell people that happened, they're like, that couldn't happen. Like, it 100% happened. Right. So I totally understand why people believe in conspiracies. But the alternative to conspiracies are digging into our own information, making sure that we know what the truth is. And this is an example of a case where we're going to make sure everybody gets counted so no one can tell us a lie with us being complicit in it because we just didn't fill out the form.
Diamond said line closed right now.
That's right.
Thank you for that, Diamond.
And Tasha said, make sure you count. She said, how do we follow the money that also counts? How do we follow the money that counts?
So the other thing that we do
from Tasha.
Yeah, Tasha, thank you.
What if you're homeless? Do you count?
That was her next question.
Yeah.
So what about the money? How do we do that?
So about the money, one of the other things we do at CPI, I just want to talk about a couple other things we do there.
Of course.
People can go to the website, CPI San Diego.
Y'all need volunteers, I'll volunteer something.
I don't know if we want what you're volunteering, we'll see.
You just got so terrible. You just got
everybody else out there.
You just got corona.
Baby, but you in my shirt. Okay. So, but the other thing we do work on budgets. So we actually do help do education about our current budgets and the budget process. That's the Community Budget Alliance. And then we work with the Invest in San Diego Families Coalition to talk about the county budget. So one is like being able to track where the money is. And we could use help doing advocacy to also improve transparency so we could do more of that work. Wow.
What?
Okay. Wow. I will call some authorities on that one.
He just read our comment, Chance.
I'm done.
I'm done.
And then we also do leadership development work to help people get on boards and commissions and other things.
So now I watched the video, and I want to talk about that because can we please finish with that? Can we finish with the boards and commissions and about this whole idea right now that people who are disenfranchised because of their criminal histories and all that are not allowed to be on some of these boards and commissions, and there's a push right now to make that happen. Can we please finish on that before we leave? I want that to be the last thing that we talk about. Boards and commissions, please.
So we've actually made some real progress on that. And the city of San Diego.
We want to finish. We're not finished right now. I want to finish talking about the census.
Okay.
I want you to finish. That's cool. I just want you to. So then I want to make sure you talk about that because that's super important.
Because the census, the thing about it is, in terms of, because Tasha's question was about following the money in the budget.
Yes.
And I think that is, we have organizations that do that at every level, the national level, state level, and then our local organizations like CPI that are trying to track where does the money come from, what percentage goes into different things. And we know that there are block grant programs that are based on population. So it's critically important that we make sure that money goes into those programs by the county.
So then it makes sense. And I think maybe one of the things that could happen or whatever should happen or does happen that I don't know about is that people need to be linked. So I would say, for one, go to cpisandiego.org and fill out their newsletter so that you can get updates. Even if you don't care, do it. Because maybe one day you will or whatever, there could be something. But I think we need to be connected to CPI so that when these grants and things come out, people are connected to someone. That's why it's important that people get to know you, that maybe hang out with Drew and I, that may not think about stuff like that, or maybe they do, that they know you or whatever, so that we can get involved in some of this opportunity and some of this grant funding that does come from the government to CPI and other places in the county 2020. There's other organizations that can get some of that money to participate in some of the specific work. Like there's some specific areas, like people who have felonies that are least likely to vote, people who are that don't desire to vote, some of the least likely to come out. Like there's funding to focus on stuff like that.
And that happens normally through the Engage San Diego table. There's a set of folks who do integrated voter engagement every year, all the time, thinking about how we get people registered to vote and then we get them out to vote. These institutions are not telling people how to vote, by the way. They're just assuming that we know that if we go out and do outreach, when we believe that this democracy isn't working the way that it should, because we don't have the right people participating. We don't have everybody participating. And that's what these organizations do. They do not tell people how to vote.
Not supposed to. It's good. But I think what happens is if you tell people about the issues and you talk about truth, then people will follow and they'll make decisions differently if they have the information.
If we do our work the way we're supposed to, we are educating, we're working with people all the time to give them the information they need to make responsible decisions. That's our job. And I think that's what this kind of conversation is about. It's about saying, like, look, let's look at the data together. And if you have questions, an organization like CPI is here to make sure that we dig into that and provide that data and information, that analysis in ways that people can consume. And I agree with you, the reports can feel overwhelming because we're trying to speak to lots of different audiences. The more feedback you get from folks about what they need, how they need it, what works better, we will do that. We will produce small videos, we'll have memes, whatever works.
Go to cpisandiego.org and fill out their newsletter. Peruse their website. You got a real live executive director right here that like you can see she's down to earth. Drew says
Allegedly.
Allegedly. And but you got a real executive director, a real sister that really understands the issues. Right, doctor that grew up in in a very realistic household. And the whole point is that you're very relatable. Yes, you're Dr. Greene, but you're Dr. Greene that has a history that understands. So go to cpisandiego.org and fill out their newsletter. Look at some of the reports. Criticize the information. Send the criticism to CPI because they'll and Brother Derek, what's his last name?
Derek Robinson.
Dr. Robinson, who is the insurance man, the Allstate guy, because if you hear him talk, and he's got a real deep voice,
Yes,
but
he does.
they will listen, and Dr. Greene will do something with the feedback that's given if there's things that we need to do. But on the other hand, we just need to get more involved, and the more we look at the information, the more we'll begin to understand it.
That's right.
Tasha says, what if you're homeless? Do you know what happens to homeless people that people who are unsheltered? That how do they get counted if you know that answer?
So there are a couple of things that are true about homeless folks. They can fill out a census form.
Okay.
They can request.
Where do they get it from?
This is the challenge right now. Normally you would go to a library.
And the libraries are closed.
Right. This is not the only way we count our homeless population. We also have a separate point in time count type count that is also done for unhoused folks.
A separate point in time count. So at a particular time, people will go out to the unsheltered areas
And do a separate type of census for that. But the ideal situation is that people are requesting a census form and filling it out during this period.
which is crazy because it's probably not going to happen. Okay.
That's tough.
So Dinah says the libraries are closed.
That's right.
They're going to do some. So replying to Tasha, they're going to do some of it similar to the normal count of the unsheltered. And there are a few groups who are committed to making it their priority this session. So that's one of the things I will say. Shout out to everybody that's doing homeless outreach, just in general. Like shout out to the attention that's being paid, the housing first arguments and stuff that's happening, like all these different. So shout out to those. Still got a lot of work to be done, but shout out to everybody that's in that space doing that work. I think more than ever in our time right now, we're seeing people who are thoroughly committed. And I want to say shout out to Tasha Williamson, who, although she did not win, she is not going to win the election. She won in an area that makes, to me, is far more powerful because not only did you move the conversation to people be able to talk about certain things, you garnered 22,000 votes from people across the county or across the city. So, I mean, just shout out to you for doing that and talking about forcing people to play their cards about where they are with the homeless stuff. And so just shout out to everybody that's in that space doing that work. Don't trust them because they lie. Don't trust the workers because they lie. It's who the people who are doing the work. Some of the people that are doing the work, I'm not 100% sure, but I think that's who she's talking about, government workers. Sarah Kent says, one more thing about the census. I read that personally identifying information won't be released for decades, which should be a comfort for some that are reluctant to share. Right? Can you speak to that?
Yes, there are legal protections in the federal government that mean that the census is collected by the department. The Census Bureau cannot share personally identifying information.
Can you say that again?
The Census Bureau is not allowed legally to share personally identifying information. In other words, they can't say Kyra Greene lives at this address, and they cannot give that to anyone, to other agencies to do any type of enforcement. So that is, and it's more protected than that. There are some times where you can't even get group data if it's too narrow, like if it would me that I could guess who the people were in that census
Okay.
district. So the idea is that we are not giving data about individual people. And sometimes that can be confusing to folks because you can look at historical census data, like forms that were filled out, and that's Sarah's point. That doesn't happen for generations.
Like I can look at my dad, I can look back to the 30s when my dad's dad
That's right.
filled out the form. I can look and see their name, their address, who was in the house.
That's
But
right.
that's not going to be
But if you
done
went to,
for-
right, but if you went to go look, for instance, for the 1990 census, there would be no way you could get that.
The problem though is that do people really trust folks? And I think that's what
So-
Tasha's talking about.
I think that's right.
People lie.
I think it's important that people don't, I understand why people don't trust, right? But the problem is that if we don't fill out the census forms, if we don't do it, then they get to say, we didn't lie. This is the truth. We did the census. Everybody had a chance to fill it out, even though we can see how that's challenging. So we have to go and fill out these forms and tell the truth, our version, our truth, and then fight to make sure that that is what gets reported.
Can I say one other thing too? I found out, and maybe you can speak to this, is filling out your ethnic identity. I haven't seen the census form right now, so I don't know if there's a both thing or not.
Yes.
But typically, like, how does that work? Like me being biracial,
You can
how does that work?
So I did the census form and my daughter is biracial. So for any person who's filling out the form, when I filled it out for the people in my household, I actually asked them how they wanted to be identified. You can click more than one racial box. You actually get a separate question that asks you if you're Latina. So you fill out that section. That's not the racial question. Then there's a set of racial questions. The thing that was new to me this year is that if you click the box that says you're white, for instance, there's a box that asks you to put your heritage. So I had to ask my husband, like, what do you want to put in there? And the examples are like German, and I'm like, you're not German. Like, you haven't, nobody in your family. So we just put white American in that part. For my daughter, she identifies as biracial, so we selected both boxes for white and for black. And then we put in the box, and even in the black form section, there's a box you have to put in your heritage. So we put in African American in that space.
Nice.
So you
But
can
do they? But how is that? So what I was told before, when you do that, are they gonna put, like, if white is first, do they only choose one?
No, so the form is the form. You don't put it in any particular order. So it's not about what they choose first. Historically, the way that we've reported census data is that we can either get information that shows that people are multiracial. We can also, when the census reports, like when those numbers that I gave you, when they classify someone as white, it means that they only answered white. If they answered white and Latino, then they would be put in the Latino category historically. Like that's how we would do the analysis. It gets a little more complicated. Some people do choose like 3 or more races, and then that usually gets put over like.
I think those are things that are very nuanced. But at the end of the day, just fill out the form. Like at the end of the day.
And some versions of it, you can have more than 100%, right? Because people can be represented, and it's like, so you get the information, and people cut the data different ways depending on the story, the version of the story they're trying to tell.
Chad says, thanks for letting me be part of the conversation. You're welcome, man. I wish you were here, bro. It would have been a lot better. Yeah, it would have been a lot better. Diamond's replying to Sarah. It's like 9 questions, nothing super invasive, and the data is not disaggregated on an individual level. That's what you said. The information is protected for 70 years.
Nice.
Okay, cool, that's good. I still vote and fill out the census because I can't fight them if I have not done my part to be able to fight. You want to speak on that?
That's exactly right.
Amen, Tasha.
Yes.
Appreciate that. She said y'all killed it. Thanks, Tom. We appreciate that. Diamond facts. Good stuff. She's laughing. They arrested me before that count. I just wish we had time to talk about just all the shenanigans that they do to keep people. That's what I'm saying. Like they do a lot of stuff so that people can't be counted. And then some of the cold stuff that they do is that they take these prisons and then they make these prisons. They show, instead of showing the people as, like, if I'm in prison, they don't show the address that I actually live on the streets. They show me counted in the county that I'm in prison, and then that county gets the voice of the votes, which is unbelievable.
Right, there's been advocacy to return to counting people in the
But
community.
right now, as it stands,
as it has been, that is true.
and you got prisons that are overcrowded by 500%, and you got 5,000 people who are counted in one facility in the county that has 16 people, and now, and you know what I mean? So that it's just unbelievable that they get, that is criminal. But again, this is why this data and these policies, and we didn't even get a chance to really drill on these policies that leave people out. If you're not counted, they redistrict, they do all kinds of stuff. They take away the strength of your voice. when you don't have the right amount of people there, they take away the type of representation that you have if you're not true and accurate and if you don't participate in the census forms. The mayor's office caught a lot of flack for that from the governor. Completely wrong and unacceptable, but also defeated the purpose of people going out and trying to do the count. People got arrested and stuff like that. So it's just unbelievable. And we see that there's no accountability, which at the end of the day, it seems like there's a lot of reasons not to trust people. But one of the things we really wanted to get started, and just thank you so much, just for even being willing to take your time to come. One of the things is we just wanted to have conversations to bring some of this like overhead data that is truly making a difference in our lives, good and bad, every single day, from someone who deals with this data, who compiles it and does all this stuff on a regular basis. Thank you for like just coming in and being willing to kind of help it make more sense. And you're just such a real person. Honored that you took the time to be here and spend 2 hours with us. It's amazing. Away from your family. Thank you for doing that. And anything else that you wanted to say, like, you know, as we come to an end, anything you want, whatever, just whatever.
I just wanted to say, just to close out, that I understand that you're both jealous of my luscious locks, and that this is why there's been so much hatred about.
I haven't been hated at all.
I just want to say that, and that, you know, I know everybody out there can see it, and that's how I would have ended. And I have the final word. Thank you.
Oh, so you want to end? You said you jealous of your locks.
I thought that was.
Whatever you have to say. I'm just saying. Next time I'll also bring a little powder for these heads. I'm gonna hook you up. That's good. That's it.
Me personally, I thought it was a $40 wig.
I've always paid more than that for my wigs. I will have you know. I will have you know. I have the finest hair.
Oh, that's right.
$40 wig.
So, but I do
do.
want to thank you both, because I think that what you're doing here is a real service to our community. Having opportunities to have real conversations about what's happening. We don't have a lot of media outlets to have these discussions.
Wow.
No,
this is beautiful.
No,
it really is.
I appreciate it for real. Drew, anything you want to say?
I mean, first of all, thank you for coming. You know, despite this whole quarantine and the apocalypse is upon us, the coronavirus. Someone said, Drew, you get to spend 24 hours with, fake doctor with a certificate in sociology studies, intro to sociology, sociology 55. That's not even 100 level classes. I'd have been like, oh, perfect. That's a lovely. I can't think of a better way to spend my Sunday evening. Didn't hang out with the girl whose shirt matched the priority model.
Also, Nancy Fetterman, if you have Drew's grade, just give me a call.
She don't have.
We can talk about.
I think
C minus.
I think that's a HIPAA violation, fake doctor.
No, that's not HIPAA. It's perfect.
You're right.
It's a fake doctor.
But I'm just saying, you can sign a form and let us all know about that C minus.
I wonder if Nancy remembers me.
I bet she does, because I bet you acted like this in class.
Oh, we would get out. Real quick, she made us read a book called Make You Wanna Holler. Make You Wanna Holler. That was a book about all kinds of stuff. I just remember she was saying, I would go out on dates with guys and I would eat because I didn't know where my next meal would come from. And I was looking at her like, you must be 100 pounds. You are. And then she would like wear like these blazers and stuff. And the liner of her jackets, the fancy dinner coats, matched the shirt. That's really all I want to point out.
That's how you're going to end this. Like coming back here.
The Fresh Prince of Bel-Air had the same jacket. You turn his on the side out.
So stupid. I just want to say honestly, like, thank you for being here, and thank you for just persevering through whatever you did to get where you are today. You represent Black women really, really well.
Yes, you do.
The spaces that you're in. One of the things you told me the other day were like, "Hey, I promise that we won't like go too far in certain areas." You were very clear about the work that I do. Like I wouldn't do it if I couldn't be authentically myself. So I just want to thank you for showing up in the spaces that you do, bringing what you bring to the space. Your character, just in general, like you are incredible, super humble, down to earth, and I'm just humbled that you would even come here. And I'm being so serious too, like that you would take the time out of your day. Because you're extremely busy. I know you are, and you guys are working at home now. Your office. So thank you for doing that. I hope that everybody would go to cpisandiego.org and fill out
Yes.
I like to point out that your shirt matches Lysol.
Listen,
Bottom.
here, I'm hoping it kills viruses.
There's this meme that says, if cocoa butter was a person, you know what I'm saying? Because you got this glow.
I'll say it.
Right.
Well,
It's crazy.
just for us to, so we can take this 2 hour, 15-minute conversation and post it, and thank you to everybody else that stayed the whole time.
Yes.
Those that watch it coming up or whatever, remember, go to cpisandiego.org, fill out their newsletter, and start looking. It's okay, black people don't get the Rona.
So what's up?
Just want to say, thank you so much for everybody that came on. Let's not, because if we keep going, thank you to everybody that stayed. Thank you, Dr. Greene, for being here. You are loved. Everybody in San Diego, show some love to Dr. Greene. If you would, be counted. Census 22, count 2020, count me. You need to be counted. If nothing else, be counted. Get informed so that we can be counted after we're counted as well. So we love you all. Thanks for spending your time.
Also, if you're feeling funny, drink some ginger ale and go lay down.
See y'all. I
love it. People don't know, man.
Man,
You